When civilians need help, they call the police. When the police need help, they call the Emergency Service Unit.
Police emergency service workers are being credited with saving a woman's life.
New York cops in full combat regalia.
CNN, there are reports of an explosion possibly.
Anytime you're interviewing a former boss in the emergency service unit, you have to bust out that big introduction. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 199, part one. It's special, the two-part miniseries for episode 199. If you haven't checked out 198, that was volume 26 of Tales from the Boom Room, Profiles of the NYPD's Arson, Explosion, Bomb Squad. We revisited 25 years later, the 1997 Atlantic Avenue, Brooklyn pipe bomb plot. They were going to blow up the Atlantic Avenue subway, but thanks to Joe Dolan, Dave Martinez, and the rest of the guys from Truck 7 and 8, as well as Paul Yerko and Rich Teamsma from Truck 11, a.k.a. the Bomb Squad, that job didn't come to fruition. We had Fred Manzanillo from Arson Explosion 2, who gave you the investigation side. Really good show. Go check it out. A lot of good stuff with those gentlemen, and it was good to see them again on my program. So tonight, we go from that to volume 18 of the E-Men, inside the NYPD's Emergency Service Unit, with my next guest, who for 20 years experienced New York City in all its depths and breadths as a proud member of the NYPD. Joining in July of 1983, those 20 years flew on by as his patrol years were spent in Brooklyn, but the majority, of course, as a police officer and later sergeant in the Emergency Service Unit. He works in Truck 1 in Manhattan, the Hollywood Truck, of course, Truck 4 in the Bronx, and as well as Truck 7 in Brooklyn, and the STS, where he was an instructor, teaching the next group of E-Men and E-Women. In that, for volume 18 of the E-Men, inside the NYPD's Emergency Service Unit, is retired NYPD Emergency Service Sergeant Bill Kennedy. Bill, welcome. How are you?
Hey, good evening, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. So we have a couple people already who are excited that you're here tonight. And then if you have a question for the sergeant, fire it away. And if I don't get to it right away, I will get to it. And yes, Joe Maliga, I know you're going to ask me if he delivered any babies. We'll get to that later, I promise. That's Joe and I's running joke. But before we get to that, you grew up in Canarsie. Tell me about that.
Yes, my life starts in Canarsie, Brooklyn, a small little hamlet, in Brooklyn, adjoining East New York and Marine Park, Brooklyn. Grew up there, great neighborhood. One thing that was nice about that neighborhood is typical Brooklyn neighborhood. Everybody was close. Everybody knew each other. I think we didn't actually leave the block until we were like 12 or 13 years old, because everything in your world was revolved around the block at 96th Street between Avenue K and Avenue L. But a lot of good friends, a lot of good people. The neighborhood was mostly Irish, Italian, and Jewish, and everybody knew each other. So you had to be careful what you did, because somebody was gonna see you doing something and call up mom, and then mom would take care of you. But it was great growing up in Brooklyn, and a lot of good friends, a lot of good memories.
So I don't have to ask you where your love and passion for the job began, because you had a good example in your dad, who was also in the Emergency Service Unit. Watching him, it is interesting, though, because sometimes, you see the sons of firemen become cops and vice versa. The sons of cops become firemen. When you look at his example, was it always the police for you, or did you have your eye, at least for a little bit, towards the fire department?
Well, I have to honestly say it was always the police department. Growing up in Canarsie, my father working in 7 Truck, and you got to realize 7 Truck covered the 7.5, the 7.3, the 6.9 where we lived, and the 7.1. So before the 70s, before they had the cutbacks and they closed 7 Truck down, it wasn't uncommon to see my father actually responding on jobs in the 6.9. One comes to mind. I vividly remember we were hanging out on the block. We heard a loud explosion, a loud crash. So we run up the corner at Avenue L, and we see it was this big box truck that was involved in a car accident, overturned. And I didn't know it at the time, but there was somebody pinned inside the car. And, you're a little kid, you get all this activity, cops are coming, glass all over the place. And then you hear that siren of that big green and white truck and the suburban REPs pulling up. And to see your father jump out and start opening up bins, and they're taking out hearse tools and start cutting the car apart, that's leaves an impression on you, like, wow, that was awesome. And another time I saw two legends in emergency. Both of them actually no longer with us, was Eddie Coulter and Eddie Rush. and on Rockaway
What a
Parkway. Yeah, Eddie Rush. Oh, what a great guy. Oh, I'm Eddie Rush. Guys listening in will know what I'm talking about. But there was some type of perp ran into a house, a bungalows type house, and he was barricaded in there. And again, having to be nosy because I see the REPs and the truck pulling up, and I'm standing up the block watching this unfold. And they get out, they throw on back then those ceramic vests, 2 shotguns. Next thing you know, they go in, and within a matter of 5 minutes, they're coming out with this guy by the shirt collar in handcuffs. And so, I got to see the unit in action on a couple things. One of the first times I've actually ever seen a floater, I think I was probably about 10 or 11 years old. My father and I, we were coming back from Kings Plaza on Flatbush Avenue. When we get off the Bell Parkway at Rockaway Parkway, and we see a harbor launch there, and we see the REPs there. So I'm like, hey, there's a police boat there. Can we go see what's going on? So he goes, yeah, let's go. I probably know who's there. So he did. The guys were guys from 7 Truck. The divers were Jimmy Model. I'm sure you heard that name before. Joe Model before he was in aviation. Dennis Olander and Jimmy Model and Joe Model actually initially were the first guys that started the NYPD dive team. So I remember standing at the pier, this little kid looking in the water, and I go to one of the ESU cops. Say, hey, where's the dive in the water? I can't see him. Yeah, it's dark green polluted water. He goes, just follow the bubbles. You'll see wherever the bubbles are. That's where the dive is underneath. And next thing you know, he actually surfaced with the person that drowned in the water. And cops back then were a little bit different. All I see, they take the body over to the fantail of the boat. He goes in the fantail. The Stokes basket goes down. I mean, we must have done that job quite a few times when I was active. The body comes up and gets dropped right out on the pier. And I vividly could remember this kid in his long purple shorts, no shirt on, that was crab fishing. And for whatever reason, he fell in, or he went to cool off for a swim, and he ended up drowning. Oh. And I say that because every time, years later off, every time we would fish a floater out of the water, and we would put him on the fantail of a boat. I always remembered, I always thought about that kid that I saw many, 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 many moons ago. But no, I have to tell you, my father was an excellent role model. My father, he never encouraged me to be a cop. He wanted me to become a nurse or a doctor or a lawyer. But he would come home and I would always take an interest. Hey, what'd you do last night? What happened? And a lot of times the emergency service type jobs tend to be very newsworthy when they happen. So, Hollywood is one thing, one truck, but newsworthy jobs are newsworthy jobs. And that time in the city, there was a lot going on, and he was on a couple high profile jobs, and I would see him on TV. So, your father's your idol, your father's your hero, and here you see, you got this living legend living in the house with you. So he never really encouraged me to, but when I decided that I was going to take the test, I took the test when I was 16 and a half. I couldn't get high until I was 20, but I took the test at a very young age. And, he had all these visions of me going to college and all these other things, but I told him, that's not really what I want to do. I want to be like you. I want to be in a police department. I want to be an ESU guy. So, he obviously he was very proud of me. He wasn't like he was disappointed in me or anything, but he was a very good role model. He came on in 1959. He spent 2 years with corrections. And then he went, when in 1961, he rolled over to the NYPD, and he went to the 7-5 precinct. So he was in the 7-5 precinct during the 60s. And in 1969, he was transferred at the ESU, and he went to 7 Truck. And he stayed in 7 Truck until, I'm sure a lot of viewers noticed from Al Baker and other people that you interviewed, in 73, when they had the layoffs and the cutbacks, they actually broke the unit up into 4 groups, and I think he was in the 3rd group to go, but somehow along the line they ended up they kept the 1st group and the 4th group, and the 2nd and 3rd group, they all got sent back to commands. And I remember it was a crazy time, because we were told to go to the truck. They're shutting the truck down, and we cleaned out his locker, and we brought all his stuff home, and he's sitting by the phone waiting to find out. And he finally got the phone call. Okay, 0700 hours tomorrow, report to the 063 precinct desk officer for assignment. So he went from being an ESU to, directing traffic on Flatbush and Avenue U in the 6-3 precinct. Well, I have to tell you that, he anybody who knows my father will tell you, he wasn't the type of guy. He took it in stride. It is what it is. And he went back to patrol. But he did he was told, listen, we don't think this is going to last very long, because they sent too many people back. And if they send any more people back, there'll be no more emergency service unit. And he actually was only out 2 months. 2 months later, they started bringing back guys. I heard rumors later on in my career. I heard that what they did is they purged. They took these two groups of guys, they sent them back to command, and they only brought back the guys they wanted. I don't know if that was true or not, but that's kind of what a lot of people alluded to, is that they wanted to purge some of the guys. They didn't want to bring back the guys that they didn't want there. But anyway, he had a great career, a very active career, and fortunately, he was still on. He retired in 1989, but he was on the job in 1986 when they reopened the truck. So he was there when they closed the truck, and when they reopened the truck after my class that went in March of '86. It's a huge class. It was 64 guys going in the unit. That was unheard of. But what they were doing, Ray Abruzzi, who was the commanding officer at the time, they wanted to build up the unit, and he had visions of building up the unit, and they wanted to reopen 7 and reopen 4, which was closed during the 70s. So my group came in, and we were, the reason why it was so big is you have to backfill now. If you're splitting 7, the 7 truck quarters, this is confusing, but 7 truck closed down and became 9 truck. The guys from 9 truck moved in.
Yeah, I remember Kevin Berry telling me that.
Yeah, it's confusing. Then 9 truck I think they went back. They went to I think it was the 150, 113 they're at now.
Yep.
The 113. So what happened is you had the crew that was covering 9 truck basically got split. Whoever wanted to went to 9 went to 9. Whoever wanted to stay in 7 stayed in 7. And then they backfilled it with the guys from my class. So it was interesting because, like, my father at the time was down at he was covering the ESU desk, and he transferred back in. So he was there when they closed the truck, and he stayed there when they reopened the truck in 1986, and then he retired out in 1989. So it was interesting. It was interesting. A lot of people say, "Did you ever work with your father in an REP?" I never worked in an REP with my father. My father, when he was in 7 truck, when I got in, he was doing late tours. And when I first got transferred in, we were still doing a 9 squad shot. So I was put into one of the squads, and I was assigned to, here's a name I'm sure you heard before. 2 great guys trained me, Mark DeMarco and Eddie Jurgens. So a lot of people say, "Oh, your father did a good." No, it was Mark DeMarco and Eddie Jurgens that mentored and trained me. And along with the other guys, senior guys in one truck, Ralph Rinaldi, George Toad, Richie Danderan, the crew that was there was very accepting and very helpful and very eager to show you things. But it was interesting. There were a couple big jobs that occurred when I was assigned to the late tours. And my father's in Brooklyn. I'm in one truck. But you know the way emergency works. When you get to the late tour, you're not running a full staff truck Adam Boy. And some trucks are running truck only. Some are running an Adam car only. So
only in special circumstances are they running like multiple REPs.
Yeah, not on a late. I mean, I don't know how it is now. Maybe in a post 9/11 world, maybe they're running a truck Adam Boy. But I'm not really sure. I've been out a long time, but it was interesting because you would get a big rescue job, or you would get a perp search, and you get a guy barricaded inside an apartment. And it could be in 2 truck, it could be in Brooklyn in 8 truck, could be in East New York, and you're pulling everybody on the first platoon to go there. And it was weird. He would be inside on a door with the guys from 7 truck trying to negotiate, and me and the guy I was working with in 1 truck would end up being in the backyard making sure the guy didn't jump out the window, or on a building across the street with a pair of binoculars as an OP post. So it was definitely interesting. I will tell you a funny story. So one time we both I got to cover the ESU operations desk. When the regular guys take off, they pull guys from the truck to cover the desk, and you basically got to do the roll call and all the administrative stuff, call all the trucks and with anything going on. And my father was down there. he was doing some type. I think he was doing EMT refresher training. He was going through the course, and so he was in the office, and the phone rings, and somebody's asking me something, and I had no clue what they wanted. So Dad's there. Dad's been here a long time. He knows, right? Let me just ask Dad, right? Remember, It's a Wonderful Life? Ask Dad. He'll know. So I said, hey, Dad. And all of a sudden, I see the color come out of his face. And I realized, I don't think I should have did that in this format. So he comes over, and he's like, what do you need? I said, this guy's asking, the borough's asking for this. I don't really hear any. They want the force figures. Give him this. And he goes back. And then later on, he comes back out of EMT room when no one's in the back. He goes, come here. He goes, when we hear, call me Jim. Don't call me Dad, all right? I said, okay, I got it. So, of course, I have to be a little bit of a chop buster. He told me what his weakness was. And anytime I ran into him, whether we were doing joint train, whether we were going to STS refresher, or I would run into him, I would always have to, hey, Dad, because he was old school. It was like, no, don't do that. You're embarrassing me. But he was a great role model, a good father. He still is. He's still around. I shouldn't say he was. And he was a good cop. One of the proudest moments for me, I know I'm going on and on about that, but
Go ahead.
One of the proudest things for me when I got to emergency was I would go on jobs. And when I got in at that time, there was a lot of movement in the police department. You had a lot of guys, whether they were on patrol or in a detail, a lot of guys were leaving, and you got a lot of new young blood that was coming in. Emergency still had a lot of old timers left. I mean, I went from the 6-7 precinct where I'm working in a squad with very little time on, 3 years on, little less than 3 years on, and we were all senior guys in the precinct. You had the Vietnam veteran era type cops. They were doing day tours, and there really wasn't that many people left. It was becoming a young job. And then I go into emergency, and I'm working with guys that are old enough to be my grandfather. And I'll say that now because they're not around to kick me in the head. But it was, and I would fly. You fly to other trucks. You don't always, even though you're assigned to one truck or assigned to a particular truck, you don't always work in that truck. So because I worked in one truck, and obviously the city's broken up into the north and the south. The north being 1, 2, 3, 4, and the south being 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 5 truck out in Staten Island. So the guys that worked in the north mostly flied in the north. Very rarely did I fly to Brooklyn. Well, I did a couple times, but most times I would fly to 2 truck or 3 truck initially because 4 truck wasn't open. Yeah. And I got to tell you, I would fly then. 3 truck had I thought some of the guys in 1 truck were old. They were young guys compared to the old timers. The 3, I was scared when I went because I'd walk in that door and I'm like, I ain't saying nothing. Whatever this guy tells me to do, I'm getting in the car. I'm not going to touch the radio. I'm not going to do nothing unless this guy tells me to do it because he looks like he's going to. But they were great guys. They were really competent, really, really knowledgeable, great guys. And I remember on the Major Deegan, we had a tractor trailer on top of a car, and these old timers, they're bringing out bottle jacks and wood chocks, and I'm like, you got to also realize too, we didn't have a full complement equipment that we had. I would say mid to late 80s, we got resupplied with a lot of good stuff, and these guys are coming out these bottle jacks, and I'm like, this obviously these guys know what they're doing. And this guy, these 2 old timers, they're jacking here. They were able to get this truck up and we were able to get the car out to get the person out. So, they're very talented, very, there was never anything that was going to get thrown their way that they were going to we'll handle, we'll take care of it. But they had a lot of experience. And then you started to see it go. So I was fortunate. I got to work with these guys, but really, I can't tell you. A lot of these guys knew my father because he was there a long time, and he had a very good reputation. And they would say to me, "Hey, kid, if you could walk in one of your father's shoes, you're going to do all right here." So I always took that as a great compliment because I didn't just hear that from bosses. I heard that from the cops, the guys out in the field, the old times. If your father's a good guy, if you could walk in one of his shoes, you're going to do all right here. And so it was nice. It was nice that they thought of him that way, and it was also very nice to be able to work with that experience. I mean, you got I started to say the equipment we started getting on the Ray Abruzzi, probably around 87, 88, all new toolboxes, fully complement all the REPs, fully filled up with equipment. You know, what a lot of guys don't realize today, and I used to share these stories with the new guys that came through STS. The truck was fully loaded with equipment. The Adam car had a little bit more equipment. The boy car had vest, water rescue. If you were lucky, you had a Hearst tool with a combination Hearst tool cutters. And then the Charlie car was a life vest, a life ring, a shotgun, and vest. So all that equipment that we had to respond to elevator jobs was elevator keys that we made when we went STS and we went to the school. We would go to the housing authority elevator school, and the mechanics, they will show you these are the type of keys you're going to need to get into these project elevator doors. They're also going to apply to most of your private residential buildings. They said when you get to the commercial high-rise buildings in Midtown Manhattan, you may want to wait for the elevator mechanics come unless it's really an emergency where you got to get in there, because they're all computerized and they get a little bit more complicated.
Before you continue, did you guys use Z-Wire too for those jobs?
Yes, we actually used to make them out of shopping carts.
Okay. Wow.
So basically what happened is we go to the school, and the mechanics, they give us these metal templates, and the guy tells us, this is how you make it. He goes, go get yourself a shopping cart from the Walbaums or wherever. And because the steel is not, you can bend it, shape it, and when you're trying to work it through the frame of the door, it's sturdy enough that it's going to allow you to open up, to unlock the rollers on the door. And we went out there. We came back from the school, and we're out there, and we're cutting shopping. Somebody went and borrowed a shopping cart from, I guess, the A&P or whatever. But shopping cart showed up, and we started cutting it out and fabricating our own elevator keys. So when we left the school, we had elevator keys that we made, and the drop keys. We managed, the way we got our drop keys back then is when we would get an elevator job and we would run into an elevator mechanic. We're like, hey, listen, you know, could I get one of them from you? And a lot of times the elevator mechanics, oh, you guys don't have one here, take this. I bring that story up because under Ray Abruzzi, when Ray Abruzzi came in, he turned around, went to all these trucks and wanted to know what you needed. What are you lacking? What do you need? And everybody was saying, we don't have a good socket set. We don't have a decent set of screwdrivers. We're carrying our own tools. If we get a job and we need a socket set, and I don't personally have that socket set in my personal toolbox, we gave them a laundry list. Not me, but the guys that were talking. Mostly was the senior guys. And every REP got outfitted with a proto toolbox, and in that proto toolbox was a fancy set of open-end and box wrenches, a socket set, channel locks, needle nose pliers, lineman's pliers, an assortment of screwdrivers. Then every truck also got alongside that an elevator electric kit. So what they did is the elevator kit, now all these keys that we used to have to fabricate and make up, an assortment of drop keys, the Z keys, the keys to get into those project doors that open out, that's usually made out of snake wire, electric gloves. So if you got to cut an electric line, you got an insulated pair of gloves to wear. Again, lineman cutters, needle nose pliers, electrical testers, Hearst equipment. Like I said, their truck had a full complement. They had a Hearst tool. They had a cutter. They had an assortment of rams. You didn't have that on all the REPs. Truck, Adam, Boy, Charlie car was all outfitted. A Hearst tool, a separate cutter. In some cases, we had gas-powered 4-cycle engines. In a lot of cases, we had electric ones in some of the REPs that you didn't have to worry about starting up. A full complement of rams on the Adam car, truck and boy car, Charlie car. Airbag, the airbags we used to jack the trains. That was on the truck. The Adam car had a number 12 bag. But if you had something where you needed it bigger than a number 12 bag, you had to wait for the truck to arrive to bring it. Every car was now equipped with the 12 bag, the 6 bag. Even a small little bag, I don't know what the number was, but it was probably about 6 inches by 6 inches. And that thing came in handy whenever you got, a couple of times we had guys pinned in elevator shafts, and, you would take the rollers off the up top of the elevator car, and you use that little bag and a wood chock just to push the car away from the wall enough so you could pull the body out. So it was amazing the amount of equipment we got, and I think it made us a lot more professional now because we didn't have to worry about, hey, if I left my toolbox back in court, if we had a job, if we had a heavy run at the change of tours, and I kind of jumped in a car and I didn't take my personal toolbox, and I wouldn't have some of these tools. So the equipment, and I would have to say it's probably got to be about 87, 88. We got so much new equipment that came, everything from hazmat suits, level A suits, level B suits. And then we started they started up the scuba program. All the units were getting outfitted with scuba setups and scuba gear, and guys were getting issued their own dry suits. So we went from 1986. It was funny. I went in March of '86, and it was a 6-week course, and it was a six-week course because it was the first class, and we were the test class for the emergency psychological technician course. I'm sure you're familiar with that's. Yeah. After the Illinois bumpers incident, a couple of years, they wanted to come up with a better way of. They were really, everything was going pro, less than lethal, and so aside from learning about taking EDPs into custody, using tasers and pepper spray and all the other less than lethal equipment we had, the big part of it was. I call it Psych 1 for emotionally disturbed persons. They would train us how to interact and how to take people going through this episode that are up here and how to try to talk them down and bring them down to here. And I didn't know it at the time. And I think a lot of us, we were very resistant of it at the time because the training was done with the New York City Department of Mental Health, instructors from John Jay College. And then the coordinator at the time for the very first group was Mike Stapleton, who we all trusted, and John Harvey. But there was a lot of interaction and role playing with these scenarios, and it was all being filmed. That was the other thing we didn't care for. They wanted a videotape to see how the group was going to do, I guess, to show it up to the brass at 1PP. So we were very resistant to it, but from what that training program started to what it eventually evolved into is a phenomenal program. And I think we're one of the very few law enforcement agencies, that paved the way with going with that type of training. And it really, when you have a guy out on a ledge or you're trying to calm somebody down, and the training was unbelievable. But I bring that up because our STS class was 5 weeks, and then you had a week of going through the EPT course. So it was a 6-week course, and you went in. You always had 2 weeks at the range. One week to learn how to shoot the guns, and then you did another week of tactics. Then you had a week of technical rescue, which covered vehicle extrication, collapse rescue. But I mean, very, very, very basic stuff. When we did vehicle extrication training, we couldn't even come up with junk cars to cut up. So I'll never forget it. We're down at Hangar 3 on Floyd Bennett Field. The wind is howling. It's freezing cold. We're all in a semicircle. We're doing Hearst tool training. The Hearst tool gets taken out. They show us how to start it. They point to us, here, start the tool up. They open and close their jaws. And they go, okay, when you get to the trucks, the guys in the trucks are going to show you how to do it because we don't have any cars down here for you to cut up. To what it became when I left with the new generation that started taking over the training, where no, we're going to get cars down there. And I don't mean me. I'm talking about the guys that preceded me at the school.
Well, let me just say, because even though housing emergency rescue wasn't around very long, John Latanzio was telling me this, that in the short time they were around, they would take unclaimed vacant cars and they would practice. And then when they were done with them, since they were owned by nobody, they were there illegally, they would have them towed. But they would practice on those cars.
So that was a common practice because you didn't have you weren't able to get the vehicle. So you go out to your truck. In my case, I went to one truck. The 80s, Manhattan, Manhattan was still, crime was still out of control there. So it wasn't uncommon to drive under the FDR drive on the west side. Parts of the West Side Highway was still up. Drive around, you find an abandoned car. The only thing you always had to make sure is we would want to make sure that they had that little sticker from sanitation because we've made mistakes before where you go down and it happened.
Swing and a miss, he struck him out.
You do some fancy talking on that one when you start popping open up doors. And listen, we're not just popping open doors. We're folding the doors down, cutting the roof off, doing dashboard displacements, different. When you're done with this car, there's nothing left of this car. It's like just metal piled up. The only thing left is the engine block and the chassis sitting on wheels under the FDR drive. And you start breaking windows. And what are you doing to my car? And that's like something you kind of really don't want to hear when you. But so what we always do is we always made sure any cars we worked on before we actually started, we made sure they were tagged by sanitation for pickup. And then we would identify where the cars was, call sanitation up. Sanitation would tag them. Once we knew they were tagged, then it was fair game because sanitation knew they would come and pick them up. But yeah, no, I'm sure, and I'm sure there's probably some other people that are still scratching it. I don't understand whatever. I went in to go visit my girlfriend. I came out. The car was in 50 million pieces under the FDR drive.
Fire department used to do the same thing because the guys in Rescue too. I remember the late John Vigiano, Joe's dad. Who was
very good, great guy,
decorated fire captain. He said, when he was not on this show, but when he was training his guys back in the 80s, they would stop on the side with the big rescue rig and start doing that in the street for the same reasons. Before you continue telling the story, I just want to acknowledge our friends watching tonight. And there's some people in the chat I haven't seen in a while, so it's good to see you guys. Boxing MMA 365, thanks for watching tonight. I haven't seen you in a bit, my friend. Josher, same to you. Jake Rixner, Pete Pranzo, who's a retired NYPD lieutenant. Kenny Vale, Eric Fries, retired first grade detective. He says, I worked in 6-7 crime, 89 and 94. I'm so sorry I missed you. I would have loved to have met you. I mentioned Joe Maliga. Let me see here. Pete Segretti's watching. Rick,
good guy.
Pete, make sure that you give me a timeline of your career when you can, because I want to get you on the show. Rick Martinez is watching. He says, hey, Mike.
Ricky, another good one.
Very good guy. He's been on the show before. Billy's dad is the one that arranged my assignment at 3 Truck. Forever grateful, and also a pleasure working with Billy and ESU. Jay Driscoll, Patty Pogan's watching, senior that is. Bill Ryan, retired first grade NYPD Arson Explosion Squad detective, Disney 1969. Frank Keene, he says, what's up, Billy, looking good. And Pete Whalen as well. It says, good man, Bill Kennedy. And Pete, same thing to you. Get a timeline over to me so I can get you on the show too. So as you were saying, and John Latanzio, as you were saying.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. I hope I don't bore you too much. But no, I mean, the training back then, even, we would get Saturday and Sunday mornings, usually Sunday mornings, we did trio training. So what you would do is you would pick something, whether there was the old Governor Hospital down on South Street along the FDR Drive before they redid it, because it's up and running again as a facility. And we would go in there and we would practice doing a rappel, doing lowering Stokes baskets, retrieving Stokes baskets. And this was before we had the ROCO confined space rescue training. So we really didn't have, we really didn't know about the 4-to-1 mechanical advantages of using the equipment to, hoist and lower, horizontal lowers, vertical lowers, working in confined space. So we went there, and you would go there with, your senior guys, your Eddie Jurgens, your Mark DeMarco, your George Toth, Jack Casey, who was the sergeant, the commander of 1 Truck, and my squad sergeant, Timmy Frawley. And you'd go down and say, what are we going to do today? Let's get all the ropes out. Let's do a rappel from the roof. Let's lower the Stokes basket. Rigging a Stokes basket doesn't sound like it's a very, technical thing to do. You say,
sounds menial almost.
Yeah, we're going to put a guy in a Stokes basket and we're going to lower him 15, 20 stories off of a building. It sounds like a menial task, but if not done right, the basket inverts. You're gonna look ridiculous when somebody comes flying out of the basket. So the training we inherited from the senior guys who would take the time out in the field, and it worked. It worked really well. These guys were great. But I would kind of say like my generation, as we started now as the older guys retired, and we started pushing to have a little bit more structured training there. And it became that. You had Ronnie Wasson, who was the CO of ESU, at one point was the special ops lieutenant down at the field. And he had brought in guys like Dennis O'Connell, Tim Smith, and they were like, no, you know what? We're gonna try to make this a little bit more structured. So then they went a little bit. There was a structured vehicle extrication course. There was a structured collapse rescue course. ROCO, when we first started doing our ROCO training, that's the high-rise rescue, ropes and confined space. It wasn't even part of the STS training. So what would happen is we learned basic knots and basic rigging from the old timers in the trucks. And Rocco, we would go to the Rocco school, which was held at the Nassau County Fire Academy. And the way they initially started out is they would basically say, we're going to have a class. It's going to be 40 guys. We want to put through this course. The city paid for us to go through that course. And it was like, we want volunteers, and we're only taking guys that are going to show up, show a real interest in wanting to learn this stuff, because you're going as trainers. You're going to go out there, you're going to learn this, and with the idea that you're going to come back and bring the skill set and show the guys in the truck what to do. So listen, I was deathly afraid of heights when I went through ESU. I'll admit right now, that was the one thing. I wasn't afraid of anything else. I was very mechanically inclined. When I was younger, I worked for contractors, doing home. So I'm pretty comfortable around electricity, plumbing, and power tools. I really didn't like heights. Heights was something I just kind of, and I was like, I don't blame you. I wasn't looking for going on a Brooklyn Bridge during the STS training, but I went up there and I liked it. And I was like, the guys are telling me, don't worry, you're going to have 20 guys jumping over your back to get on that cable, go up on the bridge, because a lot of guys like to go up on the bridge. I said, oh, that's kind of good to know. Well, anyway, my first week out in ESU, I'm with Mark DeMarco. We're working a late tour. It's pouring rain outside. And we get Adam 1, Truck 1, Adam 8, Truck 8, confirmed jumper up on a Brooklyn Bridge. So, of course, you don't have that. Those 30 guys that are going to show up on a day tour aren't there because you're not working with a full complement of people. And without any big fanfare, we pull up. The guys from 8 Truck pull up. We get on the cables. We walk up there. We find the guy. The guy voluntarily surrenders. We get him in a harness. We walk him down off the cables. And I was like, hey, you know what? To see Manhattan and Brooklyn at night, probably was 2-3 o'clock in the morning in the pouring rain. And I was like, you know what? If I could do this now, this is a snap. So, 1 Truck is not the truck you want to work in if you don't like heights, because there's a lot of jobs revolve. And it's not all glamorous jumper jobs. You got a lot of perps that get fined, nighttime burglars that could get hung up in between buildings trying to do burglaries. You get a lot of accidents.
The window washers get stuck.
Well, that happens. That happened a lot. I wasn't a cop, and I was working for a law firm in Lower Manhattan, and there was a guy that came off of one on I think it was 40 Midland Plaza, the Midland Bank building, and then another time. I'll never forget, the guy's name was Richie Seberg. Richie Seberg was a legend in emergency service. And it was the Goldman Sachs building, 87 Broad Street. And I'm walking down the street first thing in the morning, and all of a sudden I see the scaffold like this, and I start seeing glass come flying out of this building, and this guy comes out of the building on a line, and he grabs them, and they get him, and they haul him up to the next window. And I was like, see, I got to do that stuff. That's impressive stuff. I love that stuff. But you do get a lot of work in 1 Truck with heights, scaffolds, tremendous amount of jumpers, a lot of jumpers go before you get there. I had a few jumpers that, you just start talking to them for a couple minutes. One in particular was this guy. I was at 4th Avenue and 14th Street. It was on a late tour. And me and Charlie DeLaggio, who was my partner, we're on patrol, and this guy jumps off the curb by the park, and he's like, stop. I said, Charlie, this guy looks like an EDP that's watching. He's like, you got to help me. So like, what's the matter? He's up there. The guy's on the roof. He's going to jump. You got to come. So I'm like, me and Charlie get out of the car, and we're looking up. It was the Apple Bank was on the ground floor, but it was residential above. And we don't see nothing. I couldn't see anything from the ground. So I'm going to Charlie. I said, Charlie, you see anything? He goes, I don't see anything. But this guy was adamant. That there was somebody up there on the roof. He must have much better vision. So we're like, okay, you know what? Let's go check it out, because I just, the guy's just too animated about this. I said, either we're going to go up on the roof and this guy's going to try to beat us up because he's an EDP, or there's going to be somebody up on the roof. So we pull up in front of the location. We get the address. I put the address over SOD radio to let the truck know. And we go up. And when we go up, we take at the time we were using Morrissey belts. We put our Morrissey belts on. We take a bag of 5/8-inch Lifestrung, the rope, and we go up. We get up to the top floor. We start walking up to the roof. We open up the door, and we figure we're going to go on this roof. We're going to walk around. We're not going to see anything, and we're going to have this EDP on our hands that we're going to have to deal with because he's very animated. We open up the door, and sure enough, there's a guy sitting on the ledge of the roof. Little Oriental guy, and he was sitting there, and he was just looking down, and he had his hands on the side. And what caught my eye was he had his shoes off, and I to this day I don't know why he took his shoes off. I didn't, if you're jumping
I
off
think
a
it's a
building,
culture thing.
he had his shoes off and he's on the ledge. So me and Charlie go back into the stairwell. I put over. We have a confirmed jumper up. We start tying off into the stairwell. You're going to get some really good anchor points off in the stairwell with a solid steel. None of this. You see on TV, they tie off lifeline to these vents on the roof of a building, which is cast iron, will snap like a toothpick. So we tie off. We guesstimate how much rope we're going to need to make it from the stairwell to the edge of the roof. So if we make a grab, we want to have enough line that we can make a grab, but we don't want to have too much line that if we grab the guy and we go over the ledge, that we're dangling over the side of the ledge. So we measure off the rope. The guy's up there. We're not really saying anything to him. We hear truck one in the background. I mean, the old trucks had air horns. It sounded like the Queen Mary was coming. So we're on 14th Street. The minute this thing pulled off of 20th Street and made the left turn on 3rd Avenue, we heard it coming. So we're like, all right, let's just wait till the other cars get a little bit closer, because if we make a grab, it's very just if you make a grab and you're holding on to dead weight, it's not easy to pull dead weight up. You want to have enough guys there to help you pull this person back. And I'm sure I've seen some pictures that you've showed of past jumpers, and you can see that it takes a lot of guys. It takes a lot of guys to hoist somebody back over the ledge of the building. So anyway, we hear the truck pulling up. They go 84. So all right, now's a good time. Let me try to talk to this guy, because right now he's looking down. He probably sees them pulling up on 14th Street. I'm standing behind him. He's probably nervous, saying, "Why is this guy standing here?" I mean, I don't know. Did the guy know I was a cop, or did the guy think I was a fire-breathing dragon up there? I don't know. So all I said to the guy was, hello, Johnny, we're here to help you. It's all I said to the guy. The guy looks at the sky, screams at the top of his lungs, and pushes himself off the ledge of the building. Goes down. It was 14 stories.
Oh.
When he goes down, he lands on 14th Street. This poor guy just came out. There used to be this was a little west of the Palladium. This poor guy is coming out of Tad's Steakhouse with his Philly cheesesteak sandwich. He's got his cheesesteak sandwich in his hand, his girl on his arm, and as he's walking out, this guy comes down and lands right in front of him on the sidewalk. Missed him within seconds. He missed hitting this guy. And yeah, so I mean, the point of the story is we get a lot of guys. We had a lot of jumpers that go when you're talking to them. You get a lot of people that go before you even get there. I can't tell you. There was a job that happened on St. Mark's Place in the 9th Precinct. Some guys listen and may remember this job. This guy it was an SRO. It was between 2nd and 3rd Avenue. Guy gets locked out of his apartment. So his apartment is the first apartment from the roof. So this wizard figures, okay, I'm locked out. Instead of maybe go knock on the superintendent's door, or make a phone call to the landlord. Well, you know what? Just sit on a stoop in the morning till somebody comes that can let me in, or call a locksmith. He decides he's going to. The window's right there. My window's right there. The window is in part of these old row house buildings have a shaft in the middle of them that have windows that look down into the shaft. He decides he's going to take the cable lines that are on the roof. He ties a couple of them together, and he's going to lower himself over the sides of his roof. And he fell to a bloody screaming death, realizing that the cable line's not gonna hold on to him. But he wasn't found right away. So what happened was he lands now in this. There were windows looking into it, but it's a vent shaft in between the buildings. I don't know what the technical term for it is. He goes down there and he's there for a couple of days. And now this is the summer, so now the body starts decomposing, and somebody looks out the window from above because they smell something, and they're like they call 911, and the 9th Precinct calls us, and we're like, we go from the other apartment above. We look down. We obviously could see there's a body, and this area is filled up with probably about 4 or 6 inches of stanky water from the drain being clogged. Plus, you got garbage that was thrown down there. And God only knows that, when me and Charlie eventually got down there, you got syringes all over the place. So now, how are we going to get this guy out there? Well, there was a window right there with a tenant sitting on a bed. Literally, all we could do is open up the window and go through this guy's apartment. And so I tap on the window and I'm like, hey, I said, aren't you wondering why the police are standing outside your window? And he's like, oh, no, I wanted to mind my own business. I didn't want you. I wouldn't interfere with what you're doing. I said, well, there's a dead body over here and it stinks really bad. You got your window partially open. Doesn't it smell? And he goes, no, it smells fine to me. All right, it smells fine to you.
He must have had his nose clogged. You know what it is? They do say that as time goes by, your nose gets used to it. You stop smelling it.
Listen, this was a disgusting mess. I mean, I think a grown man almost gagged on this one. That's how bad it was.
I know I would. So
this building had a common bathroom. So what we chose to do is and the way the bathroom door opened out to a nice hallway. So we open up the window, not a very big window. All right. So we're dealing with a window that's probably maybe 18 to 20 inches by 30 inches. So the two guys covering the truck that night. We were in a truck. Charlie and I were in a truck. The guys covering the Adam car was Dennis Krasinski and Tony Johnson, two guys that flew in from Ford truck, two good, solid guys. And when we get down there, they needed a hand doing it. And obviously, Tony's a big guy and Dennis was a big guy. They weren't getting through this little window. So the little guy serves his purpose. He goes through the window and Charlie squeezes through the window. Now, the both of us are down there and we got to put this body in a body bag and then put it on a backboard so we can lift it up and get it out. The problem is you didn't have the room to work. I mean, we're talking about an area that's probably no bigger than 4x6, 4x7. So, and we really didn't want to start reaching and grabbing and rolling with our hands because God knows we didn't want to get hit by a hypodermic. So we use entrenchment shovels and we roll the victim over into the body bag and everything. It was a pain in the butt, but it worked well. We get them all packaged up nice. We get them on the backboard. Charlie grabs one end, I grab one end. We hoist them up to the ledge. Charlie comes in the back to help me hold this body up. And we say to Dennis and Tony, listen, you got to keep it straight because everything that's in his body, it's draining out of the body into the body bag. If you tilt it towards us, we're going to get hit with it. And we won't tilt it towards you because we don't want you to get hit with it. Everybody got that. Yeah, everybody got that. Well, guess what? The body went through and it tilted towards me and Charlie, and whatever fluids were packaged in with that body came out the back and splashed, hit us both on the face, on our uniforms. What a mess. So anyway, we get him out. Tony and Dennis, listen, we didn't mean for that to happen. I said, no, it happens. What are you going to do? I said, we'll go back to quarters and change because we stink right now. Long story short, EMS takes the body. EMS actually took the body to the morgue. And as we're going back to quarters to clean up, we got a perp job. Now we have to do a perp search in a warehouse on the west side. And I'm like, this is potentially going to go like this all night now because we got this DOA schmegma all over us and we stink and we're going to have this on it. But it was interesting. Like I said, a lot of stuff like that you saw. And, I giggle and I'm smiling here because I remember, over the years, we got a lot of guys that came in emergency, good, solid guys.
Yeah.
And certain guys, not many, but a few guys would realize very quickly, you know what? This isn't for me because it's not all about taking out an MP5, putting on a tactical vest, and taking down a door. The brunt of the work we do in ESU back then, and one truck was lock-ins, lockouts, jumpers, train jobs, EDPs, gain entry to unaided, and a lot of water rescues. We did have a lot of water rescues. And if you don't like heights, DOAs, when I went through the police academy, they take you to the morgue and the detective assigned to the morgue, he shows you, they want to show you an autopsy. They want to show you what DOAs look like in bad accidents. And the guy was like a character out of Central Casting, the way he spoke. And he's like, kids, he goes, just remember this, cops and DOAs go hand in hand. You're never going to get away from him. And that was probably one of the truest statements anybody ever told me because a lot of you know, it's not all glamorous. There's a lot of dirty work you do. And then when I mean dirty work, I mean, you know, you have to, with humility and compassion, you have to have a situation where you got to help deal with recovering the body of somebody who, you know, was pulled out of the East River, the Hudson River, and bodies in the water generally don't smell pretty good when they start breaking down. And then you'll find dealways in between buildings that
Man unders, there's nothing left of the body.
You know, the man on the jobs were messy jobs, but for the most part, they were messy jobs. And listen, this is, sometimes I wonder if I'm a little sick in the head. They were messy jobs because their body parts were ripped all over the place, but it was a clean DOA because they weren't, you know, decomposing and the body wasn't bloated. We had one in the 9th precinct one time. It started out as a gain entry. So we get there, and, you know, usually a DOA has a very unique smell. You're not going to forget it once you're exposed to it. And we get there, and the sergeant goes, "We think we got a dead body in there. We need you to take the door to." So we go inside, and sure enough, this DOA is so badly composed. Now I won't get too graphic because I know it's a G audience. But let's just say I thought the DOA's leg was moving because of the critters that were whatever, the maggots that were on I had to do a double take. I'm like, this body's still moving. It's just DOA's. So you do a lot of, that's part of the territory. That's part of putting that E-patch. That's part of putting that E-patch on your arm is, you know what? You never say no. We never say no.
Anytime, baby.
You know, when I was not running, but when I was working down at STS just before 9/11, then after 9/11, I had a good guys work with me. John Bushing, but you had him on, excellent guy. John worked, and I worked together in 7 truck, and we worked together down at the field. Franco Barbario, who later became a lieutenant in the unit, and one of the things we didn't want to hear. We wanted the guys to know, don't ever jump out on a cup. When patrol calls you, they're calling you not because you're better than them. They're calling you because they need you to help them. You got a screwdriver, a needle nose plies. You got a ladder. You got better lights. They're calling you because they need you to help them. Don't ever jump out of that car with that chip on your shoulder. What do you got? We don't do that. What are you bothering me this for? Because you put that patch on, and I was loyal to that ESU patch. This police department, the city of New York patch, that comes first. That becomes, that's like, I'm not going to fly anything above the American flag. Well, that's how it is with the police department patch. These are cops that are calling us because they need us. Don't sour them. Don't give them a chip on the shoulder. We're here to help other. And it resonated with me when the instructors told me that when I went through the training. And I hope, and I'm positive, it resonated with the guys that came through while I had, my time to get on my soapbox while I was in the school, because it's all about helping other cops out. Because, we exist solely to help other cops out who knowing us to call. It was the issue. You're right, Pete. I mean, the reality is, which he's going to have me segue into another rant I want to go on. You had to become very proficient in your skills when you were in the issue. When we would go, we did a lot of training. And initially, it was training with the guys in the trucks. And every year you went back to STS for refresher training. New piece of equipment came out. Guys went down to the field, got trained in it. They came back, and now they started showing guys in the truck how to use this piece of equipment. When we started doing the water rescues and our scuba program started, we were getting jet skis. I mean, that was a lot of fun. I'm not going to lie to you. Going down and getting time back down to Floyd Bennett Field for jet ski training. Guys were volunteer. I'll never forget. One knucklehead was like, "I'm not going down if they're not paying me overtime." And we're like, "Are you kidding me? We're getting time back to go out for 4 hours and ride around Jamaica Bay and the Atlantic Ocean on a jet ski." But there was a reason why you did that. You did that to you hone your skills and become better with your craft. And you had to become good, because there was nobody else you could call, especially when you look at the first platoon, the late tour guys. The first platoon generally is not staffed like a day tour or 4 to 12 staff is. All right. So something happens. The cops need help with something. You better know how to solve the problem. And if that piece of equipment you have doesn't work, or if it doesn't start, or if the tool breaks down, then you better know how to go to plan B, and you better know what your plan C is, because you're going to look like a fool if you can't. You're going to disgrace that patch you're wearing if you go back to that RMP and say, I'm sorry, we gave it the old college try. We tried our best. Elevated jobs. Elevated jobs were the bread and butter of what we did in one truck. Now, I know a lot of guys, not a lot of guys, I shouldn't say that. Some of the other trucks, their bread and butter was perp jobs and EDPs and perp jobs.
MBAs.
One truck, we for a small area, believe it or not, we actually had some really, really, really bad pin jobs. I don't know if I'll have time to go into it, but the elevators, we had a tremendous amount of elevators in the city. And we were fortunate. Because of that exposure, we got very good. I've worked on elevators that were electronic, computerized, hydraulic, operated off of water. I had every type of elevator key to get into most elevators, old ones, new ones. I've moved elevators by turning valves to, drop hydraulic pistons. But you have to make it a point to go out of your way when there's times we'll stop the elevator mechanics, and elevator mechanics are a good source of information. If they know you're not going to come, and they know you're not going to basically destroy their elevator and cost them like a couple $100,000 in damage to make repairs, they'll show you and they'll teach you things. And but we got very good. We got very good in elevator jobs, and you have your set routine. One of the biggest things, and it's not a criticism to the housing police, but housing, because they work in the projects, they kind of know how to use the drop keys to open up the project doors. And honestly, I don't really have a problem with them with the guys doing that. But the biggest thing that always bothered me, you got to kill the power first. Always kill the power, because elevators if the power's off, elevators aren't supposed to move. If you open up an elevator door, the elevator's not supposed to move. If you pull the emergency stop out on the elevator, elevators aren't supposed to move. I've been on top of elevator cars, in the process of putting in a DOA who was killed on top of an elevator from riding the top, and elevators move with all those things in play. Doors open, emergency stops, and power shut. So elevators are one of the most dangerous jobs you're going to go on, because you think, well, you know what, the car's only it's only above the floor a little bit. I'll use my drop key. I'll open up the door, and then I'll, it's only 2 feet above. I'll just pull them out quickly onto the landing. Well, the Two Penn Plaza, the hotel over there, me and Charlie get an elevator job in that hotel, and we get there, and the guy was stuck in the elevator car for about 45 minutes. We get there at the same time the elevator mechanic gets there. So our SOPs were elevator mechanics on scene. You defer to the elevator mechanic until the elevator mechanic tells you, I got nothing left in my bag of trips. Now it becomes a rescue. It's no longer an elevator entrapment. So we're inside this elevator, and finally the decision was, okay, we're going to have to do a car-to-car rescue. Now, a car-to-car rescue is where you open up the emergency door inside the elevator car. You bring that car manually up to the stalled car. You open up the side door. You open up the side door to the other elevator, and then you bring people across that way. Now, mind you, you're doing this in an elevator shaft, and you're probably 24 stories up. So, you first you have to psychologically prepare the people that you're moving out of the car. Don't look down. Look at me, because if you look down, you're going to see that light bulb at the very bottom and realize it's a long way down if you slip. And believe me, it's very easy. You could slip in that. So no problem. We transfer the 3 people out. The elevator mechanic looks in the car and he says, oh, I'm not going to be able to move the car because the emergency stop is pulled. And before I could stop him, he climbs into the elevator car to reset the emergency stop button. And I'm like, why is he doing that? Because there's other ways so anyway, he pulls it out as he's coming back into the car takes off. So he's coming across, and this car starts going up. Now he's vertical as me and Charlie are grabbing him and pulling his butt into the elevator with us. The people that were in the elevator are screaming, because my heart almost jumped out of my chest, because I said that a couple milliseconds later, Mike, the car this guy was in would have been above the car we were in, and either it would have stopped the car, or his body would have been cut in half, but it would have been a bloody mess. So elevator jobs are very dangerous to work with, and we made it a point in one truck and a truck and a lot of the other trucks. if you make sure you learn and you pay attention and you hone your skill. And if you weren't sure, then, you know, one thing that was always great about emergency, especially when we started getting the cell phones in the REPs, before you'd have to go to a TAC channel and say, hey, could you guys take a ride down here? We need a hand with something. Emergency was the best because we all helped each other out. So if you got on a job and it was like, you know what, I'm not really sure what I should do here, they'd call you on the phone. Well, hey, Adam 1, could you switch to TAC G? You go to TAC G, look, could you take a swing over here? We may need you for something. And it worked out. Nobody ever was embarrassed that they did it, but it was e-cops helping other e-cops out. So I told you earlier, I was one of the first guys to go through the ROCO training before we were teaching it at STS. Later on, that was part of the training that we give to all the issue cops. And I come back, and of course, with cops are chop busters. My name went from junior. Everybody called me Junior because my father was here. They called me Junior Kennedy. So everything was Junior this and Junior that. Now I became the rope boy. Oh, rope boy. Hey, rope boy. What are you doing? Playing with the ropes? Hey, rope boy. Rope boy. It was on the Lower East Side on Delancey Street. There was a 5-story building that was under construction. It was, I should say, under construction. They gutted it out and they were rehabbing the building. The entire back wall was out. They had floors in there, but no steps. And this worker takes a fall on the top floor and gets like a compound fracture in his leg. So it was a bad enough fracture. We couldn't carry him down the stairs. So we were going to have to lower this guy to get him out of the building. So all of a sudden, the high-rise kid comes out. There was a guy, Sean Crowley, who was also a new guy in one truck, but he had went through the STS class where they were now teaching it. Okay, this is what we're going to do. High point. We get the Stokes. We start rigging the Stokes. We get this guy in, and beautiful. We do a horizontal lower from the 5th floor down to the ambulance waiting below. We got 2 tag lines. Picture perfect. The press is there, filming it, taking pictures. Beautiful job. We get back to quarters, and all of a sudden, the next day, a couple of the guys like, hey, that was pretty impressive what you guys did the other day. You guys, pretty impressive. You mind taking us out in the garage and showing us how you did that? So, eventually, as the newer generation of E-men started coming, it was easy to get them to buy into all this high-tech training we were doing. A, because they wanted to be there, and B, they wanted to do that type of work. And I'm rambling on here. Is there anything you want to ask me?
No, I didn't want to interrupt you because I figured I'm like, you know what? I always tell the guest, I'm like, if I don't get any words in, if I do as minimal talking possible, that means it's a good show. So you were on a roll. I'm like, you were telling a lot of great stories. I did not want to stop you at all. But I'm like, I gotta say, explaining all this stuff from your time as just a police officer in emergency service, that first in 86 to 95, I can tell you had the deep inclination, even as a police officer in ESU, to teach. So I imagine that once you got back in, 96, 97, as a sergeant, 97 as a sergeant, it was a natural transition to sergeant. I mean, granted, is it tough? And I remember asking about this. I bring up this story. Eddie Hayes, Eddie Hayes was in the bomb squad 85 to 93, and he's another ESU guy, Truck 9. And then he came back as a sergeant to the bomb squad 95. I asked him, was it tough, or was it easier given the fact that you knew these guys? He's like, no, because now you got to be the one to tell them no. That one part, teaching, not so much. But that one part, if it was an obstacle at all to now have to be the guy to sometimes pull these guys back, was that a difficult thing to overcome?
No, for me it wasn't, and I'm gonna tell you why. Because I had the honor of working with some of the best bosses. When I came on, you had old timers like Al Baker, right, Bob Swanson, Mike Latimer, Ray Buckowitz, Jay Levy, Richie Young, Kurt Wogel. These guys, most of them were cops in the unit. Some of them were at least sergeants in the unit, but they were experienced emergency men. And, one thing my biggest takeaway I learned from being and a lot of these old time cops, the Stapletons, the George Totes, the Ralph Rinaldi, Freddie Lang, Mark DeMarco, Eddie Jurgens, Vinny Fagan. Oh, I could not say anything without talking. But one thing you learned is a couple things. Don't ever get excited on the job. Slow down. Don't get excited. These bosses that I worked with, they never got excited on anything, and I think that was that kind of resonated with me. Like, we got some really bad stuff going on right now, and nobody's yelling and screaming, and everybody's like, yeah, you know what? Go down and get this tool off the truck. I want you go over there, check your. I says, I like it. I liked watching these guys in action. And part of the biggest part was one of the things I took away was I didn't become the boss when I got promoted. I became the rodeo clown, because the way the bosses said, whenever we would go back after a quarter, after a job, we always went back to quarters to talk. Hey, off the cuff, what could we have done better? What were we missing? What we needed? And listen, if it need be, if like you shouldn't have been standing where you were standing, or why I asked for this, why did you do that? But it was all done in a good way. And listen, nobody ever really got hurt. Nobody ever got hurt out of it. When I say get hurt, not by paper. I'm talking about, maybe once in a while somebody may get slapped in the face. Maybe, I don't know. But anyway, these guys will come back. My job is to be the rodeo clown. My job is to make sure that when everybody else around you is falling apart, and it happens, we get exposed to a lot of bad things. Yeah. So we kind of become hardened by it. So if I saw a guy impaled on a fence, and now I got to cut that guy on the fence, and he's still alive and he's bleeding, I'm going to get in there with the right tools, whether I use a cutter, or I use a carborundum saw to cut him off, whatever I'm going to use. I'm focused on getting this guy off, and I'm going to not translate to this guy that I'm scared or I'm nervous. People who don't get exposed to that, and that's everybody around you other than the guys that have experience doing that, cops, firemen from rescue companies, you get experience in doing it. So, if I start getting crazy, I'm going to get this guy upset. And this guy really, he's skewed through a fence right now, and he's in bad shape. He doesn't need to see me getting panicky. The boss's job was to be the rodeo clown, and they get to keep everybody out of the way so they're not interfering with you doing the job. So that kind of resonated with me. And I've seen some really good bosses, get a tongue lashing from people who really didn't understand how we were operating in an emergency. And it wasn't because we were doing anything wrong. It was just because sometimes what happens is you have supervisors that want to tell you, this is how I want the job to go, when in reality, that may not, more than likely, is not the way you're trained to do the job. Yeah. And it may not be the safe way to do the job. I mean, the biggest thing that used to really not infuriate, but used to get, you'd show up on a job. When I was a sergeant, I would show up on a job, and you'd have a guy Barrett, one job in one truck. I was in 7 truck. I was covering the north, and you had 2 EDPs in a loft on a Bowery. 2 EDPs with a huge loft, and both of them were at the same time. 2 brothers were EDP in this loft. Can't make this stuff up. And this is on Christmas Day. One truck gets there, I get there, 8 trucks there. Again, we're working with limited crew because so we got a team. We need a lot of people. We got a team covering the one entrance on the other side of the building, one team covering the other side. And now it was a weird type fire escape, because the fire escape didn't lead to a window or a door. It led to a hatch. And we have a team on the fire escape in case this guy comes out. And these 2 guys were going off. And I get down, we got doors, both doors are secured. The duty captain was there, and let's call HNT. Let's start the ball rolling with this, because, I'm from the school that thought, let's pull out all the stops. Let's pull out all the bells and whistles. They're both in that room. They're isolated, contained. They're not going anywhere. They may fight with each other, and at a certain point, we have to go back in there to break it up. But right now, we're not there. Let's call out all the bells and whistles. Let's check off all the boxes that we did A, B, and C. So at a certain point, what's going to happen, Mike, right? We're going to have to go in anyway. We're going to have to go in at a certain point. So I think it's always better. So what? So we spent 2 hours, 3 hours on this job. We're eventually going to have to go in. But when we go in, now we took all those questions off the table when we're all being GO15. That, why did you do this? Did you wait for this one? So it was the funniest story. I'm down there. I'm just a sergeant. And so the duty captain calls the duty inspector, and the duty inspector shows up, and that nice man, but that's the last thing he wanted to be hearing on Christmas Day was he's got 2 guys barricaded inside this loft. So he goes, "Where's the ESU boss?" So I said, that would be me, Inspector. He goes, No, I don't. You got to have somebody here with a higher authority than you. So I says, no, I'm the citywide supervisor. I'm covering all of Manhattan and the Bronx. That he goes, oh, no. He goes, get your boss on the phone. I want to talk to you. I want to talk to your boss. I said, all right. So I step off to the side out of earshot. I call Ray McDermott, was the CO at the time, and I call him up at home. I said, "Hey, boss," I said, "Look," I said, "this is what I have." He goes, "All right." So he goes, "What do you need from me?" I says, "Well," I says, "Duty inspector's here. He's a little annoyed that that there's only a sergeant here." I see there's no lieutenants working. We have no issue captains working. He goes, I put him on the phone. So I give him the cell phone and I hear him saying, "Yep. Okay. Yep. Yep. Okay. Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Sorry to bother you." Gives me the phone back. He says, "Your boss says he has the utmost confidence in you that you know what you're doing." He says, "Just to follow your lead." So I said, "All right. Now listen, that's a lot when a CO tells a high-ranking patrol boss that this guy's not going to steer in the wrong direction. He told him, I'm not coming, and there's nobody else working, but it's okay. He's competent. He knows what he's doing." And after he gets done saying that, 5 minutes go by, and we agreed we're not even going to attempt to make any conversation with either one of these knuckleheads until at least HNT is on scene. Let's let HNT come. Let them try to talk to the guy. Well, 5 minutes go by. All of a sudden, you hear a commotion going on inside the apartment, and you hear over the radio, get in here now." And I'm like, "Oh boy, what the hell just happened here?" I got a team on one side that I really didn't have an eyeball on. I'm by the other door, and you could see there was somebody rolling around with somebody inside. So the inspector looks at me, and all of a sudden, I thought his head was going to pop. I really did. You've seen those cartoons before where faces turn red and smoke comes out of the ears.
Yep.
Well, I'm saying, oh boy. So boom, I tell you guys under to take the door. They pop the door. Boom, I go in and I go running into the back, and I walk into the room, and I have to tell you, there's blood all over the place. I'm like, okay, I'm watching my sergeant stripes and my ESU patch fly off my arms as I see this. But anyway, I look, and it was two of our top knots, the two guys that we had on that fire escape that opened up to a hatch. The guy came out, opened up the hatch, and pointed a gun at them while they were on the fire escape. So the hatch opens. They watch the hatch open. They see the hand come out with the gun. They grab him and the gun, and the two of them fall into the room. Now they're wrestling with this guy to get the gun away from him. So I go out there. I says, "It's under control." I said, I tell the inspector, I said, "Nobody was shot." I said, "Guy's got a little bit of a head injury," because he goes, he comes in the room. I says, he looks, and there was a loaded gun right there. And he goes, "That guy's lucky we didn't shoot. Lucky you guys didn't shoot him." I said, "I know." He goes, "All right, it was a good job. It was a good job." But this is, I guess the point I'm trying to tell you with that story, over the years, you get these jobs, and these barricade jobs, or these guys that are in apartments, EDPs that don't want to talk to you. And I learned as a cop, and I learned even more as a supervisor. You want to make sure you take all the steps. You want to slow the job down. Make sure you got all your T's crossed. Make sure you got all your I's dots. Again, at some point, we're going to have to go in there, and we're going to either have to use less than lethal. We're going to have to take this individual into custody. But here's a job where you did all of that. And what changed wasn't anything the NYPD ESU guys did. What changed was the actions that this person took by sticking his hand out the window, out this little hatch, with a gun. So you know what? You want to play stupid games, right? You win stupid prizes. So I mean, and like I said, it was a phenomenal job. But it was weird because as a boss, when I came back, I had the utmost. I knew a lot of the guys in the unit because I was there for so long. So I was there on patrol, riding around in an REP for 9 years in the Atom car, flying to the different trucks. And I made it my point to digest and learn everything and anything I can about technical rescue, scuba, rope rescue, water rescue. I made it a point to learn. And then as I got a little bit more time in, I started, as I kind of started segueing into be a guy with a little bit more experience. If somebody came to the truck, a new guy came to the truck, and they wanted to learn something, I'm going to show them. Just like Mark DeMarco, Eddie Jurgens, and George Toth, and Mike Stapleton, just like they took the time to work with me and show me and teach me, I'm going to do that. And so I don't know if you've heard this before, but issue, you need a good solid 5 years riding around on patrol in that REP before you could say, I'm comfortable with this. Now, I will tell you, I was in that REP for 9 years, and I would say probably around 4 or 5 years, I was comfortable. I mean, my Charlie DeLaccio and I both were patrol cops in a 6-7. So it's not like at that point that I'm working with any real senior experienced guys. We were trained. We rode around on patrol. We handled a lot of jobs. We honed our craft. But I got to tell you something. There were even times after that 5 or 6 years, you got a job, and you like, Jesus, I thought I saw everything. I didn't see everything. And what was nice about the unit, you knew the guys who were working on your end, and you knew who worked on your end was a locksmith, who was a legit welder, a torch guy. And if you went on scene of a job, it's not uncommon in the issue to say, so and so, go to TAC-G, you have Adam 3 respond with so and so, because you knew that they had a particular expertise with something, whether they were a licensed electrician, a licensed plumber. And there's a lot of units in the police department, don't have that. A case in point that we've done a lot of favors for retired MOS and their family members. And a typical example would be, you get a cold call in a winter where they get an aided case, and it's a retired cop's wife is getting taken away in an ambulance to the hospital because she's got pneumonia, and you go to the apartment and you find out that they have no heat in the apartment because the heat is not working. So, I mean, we're cops. We're not walking away from that. We figure a way to find who in the unit that has the skill set. And if we have to go and buy a new hot water heater, we're going to put a new hot water heater in. We don't advertise it because we don't want people calling us up. I love you too, Steven. I love you guys too. You guys are the best. But we don't turn around. We don't turn around. We do a lot behind the scenes when other cops have issues with things. And there's a lot of things the guys in the issue do to help families of cops that are going through tough times that we do in the background without the fanfare, without all the bells and whistles. I get off track about your question, but no, for me, when I got to the truck, a lot of the guys knew me, and then you got to remember, I came back as a sergeant right after the merge. Housing, that's important to bring. Housing merged when I was still a cop of one truck, that was the weirdest thing, because we had guys in the REP with us. They got housing patches, and they were in an REP with me, and we're going out on patrol.
Stephanakis was one of them. So was
Boomwood. So I got to tell you something. I can't tell you what it was like to explain to going on a job in the 17th to 10th to 13th precinct, get on an REP and saying, "Hey, what's the housing guy doing with you?" Well, we're all part of the same unit now. So I think we were all happy that when they eventually signed the paper and it came about that we were all part of one unit now, because I got tired of explaining to people why I got a housing ESU guy in the car with me. Right. And I'm sure they got tired of telling people when we went on jobs in the projects why the city ESU was with them. But so I had a lot of exposure. I mean, I worked a lot when I was in one truck. Vinny Dance and his partner worked my end, so we worked a lot with Vinny Dance, and I'm drawing a blank on his name, and I shouldn't, because he
was Steve Lanos.
No, he worked with this. He went to Canine, and I'm drawing a blank with his name. I could see his face. You get closer to 60, a couple brain cells die out on you, so it's hard to recall some important things. But so I worked with a lot of housing and our unit. We were together for a couple months before the merge with Transit. That happened. I was gone. I was out in the 13th.
Well, let me just stop you before you continue, because it was actually, I have to give credit, and I don't mean to interrupt, to Stephanakis, who explained this to me, and Latanzio, who was also housing, and Lanos, who will be on the show later in the year. He later went out to the bomb squad. So they started New Year's Eve, housing ERU did, of New Year's Eve of 93. And it was in August of 1994. And again, thank you, Steph, for this valuable information that you guys absorbed them. They had a quick STS class to get up to speed. And as you said, Lanos, I was either Lanos or Latanzio who told me we felt like the stepchild riding around in those uniforms, housing rescue in an ESU truck.
It was weird because, it's funny. The trucks now are blue and white and with blue striping.
It was Chris Hanley, to your point.
Chris Hanley. That was the guy I was thinking. Great guy. Thank you, Pete. So it was funny because our trucks were still dark blue with the white part on the top. And I'll never forget this. I got to say, there was a guy in A-Truck who was one of the best guys you ever worked with. Funny as all hell. One of the most competent emergency men I ever worked with was Billy Pizak. And Billy Pizak, he refused. Because not listen, we had truck out and boy cars and 10 emergency squads. I think housing issue had probably 4, maybe 6, and one of the guys could jump in and correct me. They had 4 or 6 REPs. They weren't
It
that
was
many.
like it was white with like blue.
So whatever equipment they had got turned into us. But we with 10 emergency squads that were fully stocked. But the truck was housing and the truck was white. It wasn't the ESU trucks we're using. And he out and out. I don't care if that thing rots out there and rusts. I'm never driving that thing because I feel like people think I'm the good human man driving down the street. And I laugh about it now. I laugh about it now because, well, what really changed? Our trucks went to white. The only difference is we have a solid blue stripe instead of an orange stripe. But it was the funniest thing. He would not, and it was awkward. You could see it was awkward for the guys too because even the situation cap we wore, we had an ESU patch. They had the housing patch. So it's like, it's like, I want to go swimming with you. I'm going to go in the water. I don't want to dip my toes in the water and stand on the sidelines. And I got to tell you, it was what was really nice about the way they did that transition was they had a couple of the bosses start riding around with the trucks. One of the guys that came to one truck was this great boss. There you go. And I think it says good. No, that doesn't say good humor on it. Was Jimmy Piori. Jimmy Piori, what a dynamite, excellent boss. So Jimmy was riding around, actually working in one truck and going out in the trucks. So we kind of knew. We knew the merge was coming. And when it happened, when the housing guys showed up, I really think it was seamless. I don't really think it was a big issue. I have a really good story I want to tell you about Jimmy Piori later on as it pertains to 9/11. If we run out of time, we run out of time.
We're fine. No,
But transit I was gone for. And now so when I got promoted and I was out in the 13th precinct and the merge happened. And again, timing is everything. I got on the job with little time on. Obviously my father had something to do with that. And B, there was a lot of movement in the police department in the 80s because they were hiring classes like crazy and people were retiring. And I got out, I got promoted, and I never thought in a million years I knew I wanted to be back in emergency. I didn't think it would happen within a year. But like anything else, I didn't think it was going to happen because when they did the merge, there were a lot of bosses they picked up. They picked up sergeants, they picked up lieutenants from transit, they picked up from housing. So I says, there's no way I'm getting back now because guys get there, guys don't leave the unit.
Right.
But what did happen was there were guys that won sergeants that got promoted to lieutenant. There was guys that were in the units that were bosses that were like, you know what, I'm part of the big NYPD now. And guys wanted to pursue other areas, who wanted to go to crime scene, who wanted to go to bomb squad, who wanted to go to a precinct detective squad. So within a year, I get a phone call from somebody within the unit, and it's like, listen, they're lining up people to bring back. Your name came up. Are you interested in coming back? I says, is the Pope Catholic? Of course I want to come back. I mean, it's a no-brainer, I said, but all right. So just honestly, at that point, I was in the 13th precinct. I was in the 13th precinct. I got pulled off patrol fairly quick because the CO at the time wanted somebody who could train the rookies to do conditions. So I kind of got volunteered, like, hey, Sergeant Kennedy, I know you, I know you have a little, I know you can handle this for me. What do you need, boss? Michael Darby, what a great guy. He goes, I need somebody to take the rookies out in plain clothes, and I need you to write C summonses all over the precinct. Go after the quality of life type crimes. We got a problem here. He goes, I'm getting my ass kicked at Comstat. One thing I never volunteered for anything, but if a boss asks me to do something, or if another cop asks me to do something, I'll never say no. Plus, because of the ESU background, and he knew me from being in one truck, he kind of knew I liked that training stuff. So he puts me in charge of the precinct conditions, and that's what I did for my first few months in the command. I'm going to all the parks, and I felt like the park enforcement guy, but we were, within a couple of months, we solved our problem of the homelessness in the parks, the drunks in the parks, the public urination. So then what happened is they had a spot in anti-crime opened up, and somebody else wanted the spot, but Captain Darby comes to me. At this time, he was DI Darby. He's like, listen, he goes, I want you to take that spot. I said, no, boss, I appreciate it. I'm not interested. I said, so-and-so wants. He goes, no. He goes, I want you. He goes, you made me look at a comp stat. He goes, I know if you're in that spot, he goes, I know it's going to be a good fit for the guys that are there. It's going to be good for you. So again, I took the spot. And at that point, I have to be honest with you. I never did anti-crime. I mean, I was a patrol cop in a 6-7, and I worked great cops there. And I get to the 13th precinct, and again, you know, we call it Camelot. Great group of guys working in the 13th precinct. Now I get the anti-crime team, and you had cops that did anti-crime there. I listen. I had to follow their lead. I'll fill out the radio book. I'll make the entries in the anti-crime log. But I had a guy like Kevin Buell, who was a good anti-crime cop there. I was like, hey, listen. I said, Kevin, I know how to be the boss, but I don't really. You got to tell me what you want to do here. So my very first night going out in anti-crime, we had a couple robbery patterns going on, and I'm taking my little briefcase with my paperwork, and we're walking towards the taxi cab. He goes, what are you doing? I says, we're going on patrol, right? He goes, very politely, he goes, Sarge, he goes, we can't, that car's burnt. Everybody, it's a small precinct. Everybody knows what taxi cab. He goes, and when you're carrying that, this is how we're going out. We're going to stick our radios in a pocket, and we're going to walk up to the area of the precinct where we know they're having robberies. He goes, just follow my lead. And we walk up to Broadway between 25th and 29th Street. He's like, I said, what do you want? He goes, we're all going to go on TAC G. One guy's going to stay on the division radio in case shit hits the fan. He goes, we're going to go on TAC G. He goes, you go stand in that store over there. I'm going to stand over here. So-and-so's. And we're just going to watch this corner for the next couple of hours. And I'm like, okay, these guys are getting over on me. They're going to watch this corner. I said, they got me in the store. They'll probably disappear. Well, guess what? These guys are working the radio, and I'm listening and I'm learning because that's not my forte. You need me to use a hearse tool? You need me to tie a bow line or Canadian 8? I got you covered. But I'm listening to them and I'm watching them and I'm like, and I'm hearing, yeah, he looks good. Yes, his eyes are going towards the guy's pocket. They're good. Next thing I know, so, all right, we're going to get on him. And we followed these guys around the 13th precinct, into the 17th precinct, into the South precinct, and eventually they walked off the set. Once they crossed the dividing line from Manhattan North, we walked off the set and we went back to the precinct. And I'm like, you sure those guys were going to do something? He's like, it's like going fishing, Sarge. You just got to keep throwing a hook in the water, and eventually you're going to get something. And we would go out there and we would set up. Like I said, we're not driving around cars. We're not working off the radio. That same team showed up again about a week later, wearing the same clothes, mind you. But this time they actually did the robbery, and we were right on them. They go down into the subway, and one guy thought he was slick. The guy drops his jacket, and the two guys are running through the subway, and they go in at 29th Street, but they're going on the southbound side, and we'll wait for them on the platform at 23rd Street. And I tell you, it wasn't the nicest feeling in the world when you literally are watching guys who are robbing people, and they take off like a bat out of hell, and then you catch them coming out of. It was just a well planned, orchestrated event because of the guys in anti-crime. They were the guys running the show. I'm learning from them. But to grab a guy and have a guy's heart like it's going to, and guys watching that know what I'm doing. I didn't do nothing wrong. But their heart's jumping out of their chest, and you're looking at them and you're like, I know you were the guy that did the robbery because I watched you do it. We all watched you do it. So that was a great experience. And I kind of like that. And I honestly, Michael, I never thought I'd be able to get back to the issue. So I was like, you know what? I'm not afraid of change. I love the issue. I never wanted to leave. But I says, I could get into this going into maybe the squad or into a narcotics team.
And let me just say, that was when anti-crime was anti-crime.
Yeah.
That was the real anti-crime back then. So that was a great detail to have.
Look, I mean, just to give you an example of the caliber of the guys. I mean, I remember seeing the anti-crime cops in the 6-7 precinct, and I was in awe of these guys. These guys were like gods. You know, you see the crime team showing up on a job, or you see the crime team coming in with cars. You were just impressed by these guys, the way they carried themselves. They were so knowledgeable. They knew their stuff. The anti-crime teams, really, really got a bad rap when they got rid of these teams, because you really want to reduce crime. The only way you're reducing crime is not by calling it a fancy name and keeping a guy in a uniform. These guys were dedicated guys that went out looking, and they made quality arrests, good quality arrests. And I experienced it working with these. I was an emergency guy. I wasn't an anti-crime guy. I learned, and I was very, very impressed watching these guys in action. And they were going to court on things, the collars, knowing what to do, knowing how to talk to the district attorneys, having a successful prosecution, not these cases getting 343. That was anti-crime. And I got to tell you, I got a little bit of a taste for it, and I liked it. But a year went by, and out of the blue, I got that phone call, and I had a good reputation in the issue. A lot of people, when the rumors were floating around that they were bringing people back, I was getting calls from guys. Listen, I spoke to so-and-so. We're pushing for you. We want you back. Because I don't know what happened from the time I left to the time I got back. All I know is a lot of people say, no, we want to get you back. And I really appreciate your confidence in me, yada, yada, yada. I go to work at a 13th precinct, and it was the night before Flight 800. Out in Flight 800 went down.
Long Island.
I get a call at home, and it's like, hey, listen, it was the sergeant on the desk of the 13. He goes, listen, you must have played the lotto. Your lottery ticket came in. I said, what was it, Mike? He goes, you got a telephone message here. You got transferred back to ESU. So now I know the way cops are. I'm like, oh, Mike, listen, thank you very much. What's the date of the entry? What time did it come in? I said, thank you very much, Mike. I really appreciate it. And I tell my wife, I says, they just told me I got transferred back to ESU. I said, this was the day before the plane went down, because I got back the day that night I was transferred. So I'm not saying nothing, because I'm going back to work tomorrow. I'm coming in for a shift, and I'm not saying nothing to anybody until I see that telephone message for myself, because somebody, as a joke, probably transferred me back to ESU. And it's been done before, where somebody tells a guy, hey, you got transferred back. Guy shows up with his Larakis gear, his ESU uniform. Hey, I'm back. And it was like, we didn't transfer you back. Somebody's playing a game with you. So anyway, I go in, I walk behind the desk very stealthy, and I get to the telephone message, and I open up the book, and I look down the line, and I see there's a telephone message, and it's got the guy from the borough command. So again, I say, I'm not trusting anybody at this point. I think somebody's playing me. So I pick up the phone, and I call up the borough, and I'm talking out of the side of my mouth, because I don't want the lieutenant and the other desk sergeants there to know what I'm talking about. And I'm like, I said, could you tell me who got the message? What time the message came? No, it's the sergeant. Just legit. You came down this day. No one's playing the games with you. You got transferred back. I said, all right, thank you. I put the phone down, and they start laughing at me. You thought it was fake, didn't you? We saw you walk in. But so I got transferred back, and which was weird because I come back, and obviously when you come back in as a boss, you have to go for an STS refresher. You come back in, if you've been there a while and you kind of know what you're doing, you kind of know how to start the car up, so to speak. You ride around with the citywide supervisors. So I came back, and I was with the citywide supervisor for 2 or 3 days, and that night I wasn't on it, but that was the night that 800 went down in the Atlantic, and I did a couple of car tours with the lieutenant, and I was like, what truck you want to go to? We have openings. And they told me which truck says opening. They made it very clear, you're not going back to one truck. So I said, oh, no, I wouldn't want to go back. I understand it. I said, put me where you feel you need me. I don't care where I go. I don't care if you send me to a truck on the moon right now. I'll figure a way to get there, but I'm so blessed to be back here. I don't care where you put me. Wherever you put me, I don't care. Put me up in Canada. I don't care. I'm going there. So I ended up in Ford Truck, which, I knew the area a little bit because I flew there a lot when I was working in one truck. And I mean, I can't say enough good things about Ford Truck. Ford Truck was a phenomenal truck. I mean, they called us the Irish Mafia because I got the squad, and in the squad it was Kennedy, Flannery, Madigan, Briggs, Miller, and oh God, he's gonna kill me if I left his name. And I can't think of the other guy's name. but they called us the Johnson. They called us the Irish Mafia because we had all Irish last names. But
The Westies.
the Westies, that was the other thing. That's what they call us. We had a solid group of guys and all competent, top shelf. I mean, you probably even spoke to some of the guys' names that I just mentioned in that group. These were seasoned, experienced emergency men who knew what they were doing. So I knew emergency work. My biggest fear going to the Bronx was in one truck or in 7 truck. If you gave me a job at Remsen Street and this location or Skidmore Lane, I'm finding it. I'm not getting lost. 4 truck, I had to pull out the Hagstrom back then because I just didn't know the area. But the guys knew it really well, and they were unbelievable. They were unbelievably talented e-cops. But you talk about the workload being different. I went from one truck we had our fair share of perp jobs and hostage jobs, but most of our exposure was going to backup 2 truck or going up to 3 truck on a job or jumping across the bridge to 8 truck. 4 truck had a lot of perp jobs, it's still 95, a lot of gun jobs, a lot of perp jobs. There it is.
Look at that beauty.
Let me tell you something. That thing roared when you went down to Deegan with that. Tell a funny story about that truck. I'm with Jimmy McGrath. That was the guy I forgot. Jimmy McGrath's driving that truck. We're going on a Deegan on a pin job on a cross Bronx. Now, what they don't tell you about these big trucks is they don't drive very well in the rain. Okay? So you're going down to Deegan, and these trucks don't really go that fast. And Jimmy was not going excessively fast, but we were going to a confirmed pin job. And he's going down, and I'm doing what Sergeant's supposed to do. I'm blowing the air horn because Sergeant signed the run sheets, and we blow the air horns. The cops do everything else. And we're going down to Deegan, and I'm looking in the fisheye mirror that you see on the front bump of that truck.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of like seeing the back of the truck looks like it's trying to catch up with the front of the truck. And I'm like, oh my God, this ain't good. So what happened, these trucks had a tendency. They started when it got slippery out and it just started raining, they tend to go sideways. And when you're going down to Major Deegan and the truck is going down sideways, it's a very frightening feeling because if at some point that truck doesn't get straightened out, you know what's going to happen, right? The truck's going to start rolling over.
Right.
And you're rolling over in a truck like that, you don't want to get hurt. And I'm looking at this thing happen, and all I did is I look over at Jimmy McGrath, who's driving the truck. He goes, I know, I got it. And he got it, and he straightened it out. And we went on our merry way. The pin job got canceled. So I said, great, we almost got killed going to a pin job that got canceled. But that thing was some beast, that truck, and it roared. My only criticism with that truck, you can't see it from the angle you're looking at it. That wasn't a full cab. So the biggest problem with that truck is that was a true truck for like a cement truck. So when you got in the cab, you were sitting you had the driver, the console with all the buttons on it to turn on the generator and the lights, and you were squeezed in. The passenger side of that truck was countersunk in. It's kind of hard to tell in that one there. But anybody who worked a 4 truck will know what I'm talking about. You take 2 big guys like Dennis Krasinski and Tony Johnson in that truck. I don't know how they got in that truck. They probably had, one guy used a shoe on or something to squeeze the other guy in because it was a tight fit. It wasn't a very roomy truck. And I'm a little guy. And sometimes it was like, oh man, especially when you're going down to Deegan, that thing baby starts going sideways. You're like, oh, I don't want to be a pin job in this bad boy. This is not going to be good. But what a great group of guys. And I was up there for a year. And again, I get a phone call from the office, 7 truck had Joe Maltejo was one of the sergeants. He was deployed to Bosnia. John Durkin, who the name John Durkin. John Durkin later became an inspector on a job. Good guy.
I have to say it because you mentioned 7 truck. Every time you mention 7 truck, I got to say it. 7 truck. Feeling lucky.
Hey, see the logo on the wall. Got it up there.
Exactly. So you get down. Wait. So hang on. I think so. Hang on. So you had a guy go to. That must have been the time Danny Richards went to Bosnia too. So you had Danny Richards from the bomb squad, and then that guy from ESU.
Yeah, Joe Maltejo was. Well, I don't really know anyone. Well, I don't really know, to be honest with you, but I know Joe was very active in the military. He had a deployment there. So what happened was you had in 4 truck, you had Bobby Nolan, John Coughlin,
right,
me, And you had John. Oh God, he's gonna kill me. He worked in. It was a cop in 2 truck. He did the late tours. He later became a lieutenant. Somebody, if you know what I'm talking about,
Murphy?
not Murphy. John Murphy. I actually got the 4 truck. Was John Murphy got promoted to lieutenant? Guys, who's the lieutenant that was? He ended up being a late tour lieutenant. He was a cop up in 2 truck. Come on, Patty, give me the name. I don't want to make the guy feel it. John. His first name was John. Someone's gonna type.
Yeah, when they throw it in there, I'll put it up on the screen.
So they had a lot of sergeants there. What happened in 7 truck? It was unique. Joe got activated to go to Bosnia. John Durkin was several names away from getting promoted to lieutenant, and John English, who was the other sergeant there, was out on a line of duty injury. He's going to be out for a couple months. So you went from having a late tour sergeant and 3 sergeants covering all the squads to one sergeant was going to be, and it was a late tour sergeant. So again, I get the phone call from the truck lieutenant, and he calls me up. He goes, "Hey, listen," he goes, "I need a favor." I said, I don't really like when Mike. No. That's no. What the hell was his name? John. It'll come to me. You're thinking Sobochinsky. It wasn't Sobochinsky.
No, it wasn't Sobo, who I want to get on the show. I've been trying to get Sobo for a while now.
I haven't seen him in a long time. But anyway, what happened? I don't like when guys call me up and say, "Hey, listen, I need you to do me a favor." I really don't like that, Mike, because I have a tendency. People tell me it's a character flaw of yours. You don't know how to say no. Sometimes you got to say no. So, guy, look, I need you to do me a favor. I said, "Of course. What do you need?" He goes. So he tells me, "I have no supervisors here. I'm short." So I went through the roll card. This one. He goes, I need you to come over. And I got to be honest with you. I love the guys in 4 truck, and I have to tell you something. I knew what I had there. I had gold there. I had senior guys, and I had gold there. But I was a Brooklyn guy. I did my NSU in NSU 13, 7.3, 7.5, the 8.1. I worked in a 6.7, and I grew up in Canarsie. I knew the area. I was like having an opportunity to go back to an area that I know and not having to pay the toll. It was kind of going full circle for me. I'm going back to where I started. I was walking foot posts in NSU in the 7.5 up on Liberty Avenue, Fulton Street, Pennsylvania Avenue, the 8.1, and I'm going back to an area where I started. So to me, I kind of felt, you know what, I'd rather go back full circle. Let me go back there. And I didn't consider going from the fire into the frying pan because 4 truck and 3 truck in their own right. You know, I'd match the commands that they're covering to the 7.5, the 7.3, the 8.1. It was just as busy and a lot of gunplay and a lot of action there. But anyway, I said, all right. So this was on a Thursday morning. He's telling me this. I said, yeah, okay. He goes, all right, good. You're starting tomorrow on a 4 to 12. I said, what? He goes, yeah, I already spoke to the CO. He goes, we're going to be transferred by a telephone message. So I end up going to 7 truck, and the squad I ended up going in was it was interesting because they used to call the other guys in the other squads, they called my squad the District 7 squad because I had Dennis Healy, who was a transit EMRU guy, John Bushing, who was a transit EMRU guy. At some point, I had Dan Hegarty, who was a transit EMRU guy.
Did you ever have Franco?
Franco, I worked with Franco up in 4 truck. And yeah, that was interesting when I went up there because Franco was a good guy. And somehow along the line, I don't know why, but there initially at one point, there may have been rumors that there was bad blood between me and him because I was a 1 truck guy. And they kind of said him, oh, Kennedy's coming here, Franco, and he's a 1 truck guy. And the transit guys didn't get along with the 1 truck guys. I got along with everyone. The only guy who Jeff Ditto, if he's out there, or if he sees this on a repeat, I still have a copy of that sticker you plastered all over Low Manhattan that said very clearly, that drew the line in the sand that said, Adam 1, truck 1, boy 1, canceled, 91 by transit. And years later, I'm working with Jeff in 7 truck, and I'm like, yeah. He goes, that was a good one, wasn't it? I said, oh, you got me good with that. I was that guy with the steam coming out of my ears. And I thought my head was going to pop. That they went all over Low Manhattan on every light pole and every mailbox, and they put all these stickers up because they knew we would see it, and they knew that it would get under our skin. And to this day, nothing will ever compare to that. It got us good. But anyway, so I get to 7 truck, and I had John Bushing, Dennis Healy, Mike Wormuth was there, Regina McGee, And then we got Robert Zajac came over from 7 truck, so from 5 truck. He was working a 5 truck, and for whatever reason, he needed to get a transfer over. So we got him in 7 truck, and I have to tell you something. I had the best. I think at that point, I had the best squad in the division. I really did. I mean, look at the talent I had there. You met John Bushing. You know John Bushing's talent.
Yep.
I don't know if you met Dennis Healy or
No,
if you
not
spoke to them. I had 2 solid guys that were good with tactics, good rescue guys, and both were paramedics. Okay. I had Haggerty, who was a volunteer fireman, who was good with rescue jobs. Worried a little bit about his pension, but he was a good, talented guy.
So was Bushing. He was a volley too.
Bushing was big in the volunteer fire department. Listen, I got to tell you, here's my opinion on a volunteer fire department. These guys get some outstanding training. And as a training guy, if someone's going to give you training, absorb it and take it, and just take what you have there, and whether it's coming from ESU or it's coming from the fire service, take the training and turn it into gold. And that's what these guys did. And I had Mike Warmit, who was a Marine, and Robert Zajac came over, and I had a great team. We had like-minded individuals that knew when the bell rang, we went out and we did the job. And I knew no boss was going to call me up. And I will share this. It happened to me once, and I said I'll never let it happen to me again. And I won't say what truck it was, because it may not even been my truck. I could have been. I remember I was a citywide supervisor when the supervisors weren't covered. But we had shots fired, and it was an evidence search in a lot. And 2 guys went there, and the duty inspector was like, I need you to search the lot for any spent casings. And they got out of the car, they turned the light on, turned the light off, went back in the car and left. And this duty inspector called me up, and he was livid, like, what was this all about? And I was like, all right, boss, I says, it's kind of really not going to be hard for me to figure it out. I know who it is because I heard them get dispatched to the job. But I says, now the boss, I kind of knew him. I've been on a couple jobs, but I didn't know him. I didn't work in his command. So I said, you see me on a couple jobs. You recognize the name. You know, I know who you are. I said, you got to trust me on this. I will take care of it. And I did. Nobody got green papered. Nobody got hurt. But they kind of knew we're not doing that. And subsequently, when I took over the school, that was a no-no. You never say no. Jack Murphy, an old-time cop in sick truck, had this line: know your job, do your job. Know your job, do your job. Don't, if you want to come into a unit like emergency, or you want to go into anti-crime, or you want to be a detective, when you got to do detective work, do detective work. When you got to do anti-crime work, do anti-crime work. And when you got to do emergency work, do emergency work. None of this, oh, I came here to do tactics. Oh, I don't like tactics. I want to be a rescue guy. Oh, I don't want to do rescue. I don't want to do tactics. I'm a medical guy. I came here to do medical work. No, we're jocks of all trades. We're masters of none. And that's why we're here. And if you don't want to climb a bridge, if you don't want to get your feet wet by jumping in the East River at 3 o'clock in the morning, if you don't want to turn around and stand on the other side of a door in a housing project for several hours while we negotiate with an EDP who we probably can talk into resolving the situation, then you really don't belong here. Go somewhere else. And fortunately, some guys did come here, and it was like, this really isn't for me. I expected this to be something else. And honestly, I didn't spill no tears when guys like that left, because I wanted guys in emergency that were going to be career emergency men that wanted to be here because they love being a unit. The unit is ripe with all sorts of different traditions and wanted to maintain those traditions. And it comes back down to our fundamental root. We're here to help other cops out. So I ended up going to 7 truck, and that's what I got. I got probably one of the best, in my opinion, one of the best squads. I knew whenever I went on a job, Bushing, Healy, and Bobby Zajac, I was never. You could ask me if you. I never ran it on a job, and you never saw Billy Kennedy walk on a pin job and say, "Give me that. You don't know what you're doing," and take the Hearst tool away. And unfortunately, we had some guys that came back as bosses that were never really cops here. That my job is to be the rodeo clown. I'll step in and I'll help with the rescue. There were many warrants I did where I was the tool guy and I breached the door. Number one, because I was very good at breaching doors. But number two, you had a role to play. But my role was not to go there. If the Adam Carr's job, they're going to run the job. And I'll be the rodeo clown and keep everybody out of the way until the job's over.
Right.
I keep rambling. I'm sorry about that.
No, it's fine. Like I said, the guys are loving it, and I'm loving it because you watch the show. I like to give the guests pretty much to put them in the driver's seat and let them go. So, I guess we can get, because God, the time's flown by. We're almost at 2 hours. It doesn't feel like it doesn't feel like we've gone that long though.
So people have told me when I get on my soapbox, I tend not to shut up. I just hope.
I don't care. But that's the point of the show. I don't like to do. I always say this. You've heard me say it probably, which is the show has my name on it, but it's really not mine. It's the guest show. It's your story with whoever it is: fire department, police department, news, sports. It's your story. Tell it. I don't want to get in the way. So, but I will say, and I'm glad you bring that up because I've said this numerous times on the air and off the air, and I'll get to 9/11 in a second. With all due respect to previous eras, certainly your dad's era, certainly what the guys and the gals are doing now with all this great technology and equipment that they have, which is even, that must make you salivate when you see what they're working with. I feel like that the best era of ESU personally was right after the merger of everybody, not just housing, but once transit came in too, and you had all that expertise of guys that knew man under jobs, the guys that knew elevator jobs because they worked in the projects, or how to get a door down without, tearing the door apart. When you combine that with what the city ESU guys and gals already knew, that 1995 to 2000 period, right before that terrible day, might have been the apex of emergency service in New York City, in my humble opinion.
Well, I will share with this again. We stand on the shoulders of the guys that came before us. So
right.
I don't think I'm not criticizing other generations in ESU, but I think it's fair to say that my father's generation were riding around in Suburbans with equipment in the back of the Suburban, and the only reason why they switched over to the Boxstar RPs was because, God rest his soul, Patty O'Connor and his partner Fitzgerald were killed. They were hit by a fuel oil truck on Thanksgiving. And what happened when that fuel oil, they stopped to help a motorist on the BQE. And when they got hit by this truck, basically the Suburban just kept rolling on iguanas. I got firsthand knowledge of that because my father was on that job. And that job, he came home very shaken up from that job. And it was then, they realized they got and that's the first version of the issue truck. They called it a lollipop truck because it wasn't a full box cab. It was a half box cab, and they were so concerned about the truck getting rear-ended again because that Suburban only had one little bubble light and a couple blinking lights on the side.
Let me see if I can find it.
It's a weird look. They have big rods and these big light things. They called it the lollipop truck. It looked like, you had lollipops mounted on the back of the truck. But and I'm going to talk while you're looking for that picture.
Yeah, go ahead. It's fine.
But as the equipment, another thing, there was a guy that worked in 9 Trek. His name was Fitzpatrick. And one of the reasons why we went from using a manila rope, a rescue rope, to static Comanto nylon lines was Fitzpatrick's brother. And I think I got the story correct. And if anybody's in a room is listening, tell me if I'm wrong. His brother was a fireman who was killed during a rope rescue because they were using the manila rope.
It's like 85.
And he played a role in making sure, we're going to upgrade the ropes in the issue. So, a lot of bad things happen, and out of bad things, new equipment comes out. Frankie LaSala, when he was killed. Now, Frankie, I was working the night Frankie LaSala got killed in that fire. And that, you want to talk about a tragedy? Nah, that wouldn't. Nah, that's not it. It was in the back.
I'll keep looking. But that was before you get into Frankie. That was January 5th of 87. He didn't die right away. He died 5 days later.
A couple days later.
Yeah, but that one, it was right down the street from you guys. Because for those of you that don't know, that aren't familiar with the geographic makeup of the city, One Truck's quarters are in the 13th precinct. Which is where, you talk about being a sergeant there. You probably had Maura Smith and Bobby Fazio there too for a little bit when you were.
Bobby, I did. Moira came over, I think, after the merge. I didn't know, but Bobby I knew very well.
Yeah. Yeah, but that day in 87, what happened there with Frank?
So the thing I'm saying is, unfortunately, you got to think, if you look at the changes in emergency equipment wise, I could attach that to every cop that was seriously injured or hurt. The REPs, Patty O'Connor's father, all right, the rope, Fitzpatrick's brother, who was the fireman who got killed. Frankie LaSala, we went from having nylon straps on the Scott packs to having Nomex straps poked on, because so what happened was there was a apartment building right next door to 13th precinct. You know, sometimes you can't, you can't make this stuff up when you say this, but Frankie was the erm in the truck. And for guys who are watching the show that don't know what an erm is, we turn out a truck out in the boy car. That means we got 2 guys in the truck, 2 guys in the Adam car, 2 cops in the boy car. That's 6 bodies. If there's 10 guys working, you got to do something with the other 4 bodies. So those 4 cops will fly to another truck, and it could be 2, 3, or 4, 6, 7, 8, 9 with 10. But sometimes what happens if the roll call has coverage for truck, Adam, and boy throughout the city, that means every truck is running a truck, and Adam, and a boy car, and there's maybe 1 or 2 bodies over. They keep that body as a floater within the truck, and they call him an erm. They call him the equipment repairman. And the erm now becomes the 3rd guy on a truck. But the erm as a 3rd guy, he's an equipment repairman. But what he's supposed to do in theory, and which the sergeants basically enforce that they do, is you're an extra guy tonight. They're going to pick out certain equipment. It could be the high-rise kit, could be Scott packs, could be the water rescue equipment, could be the Hearst equipment. And they're going to say, we want you to inventory, copy down the serials number, do a function and a maintenance test on it, do an inspection on it, make sure everything's good. If there's something bad, we're going to put it out of service. Which, just not to get off the beaten pit, but every cop in emergency is assigned equipment that they're part of their self-inspection. So for me, when I was in one truck, I was in charge of the high-rise rescue kit. Somebody else would be in charge of Hearst tools. Now, in theory, what you do is every year you switch it off. So everybody gets good at learning what equipment is supposed to be in the cache, in the inventory. Jack Casey was the sergeant going home on a day tour, and Frank was an erm. Frank was happy. Oh, this is great. We're going to cook dinner tonight, and I'm going to watch TV. He goes, Frankie, you don't get too comfortable. He goes, I need you to take an inventory and inspect all the Scott packs we have in the truck. That it means the back of the truck, which we had several because we had spares, the REPs, what's in the storeroom. I want all the bottles checked. I want all the Scott packs checked. I want a function test done. Frankie went and he inspected all the Scott packs. Now I forget the time, but I know it was after dinner, and we were just getting ready to go back out on patrol, or we were coming in for our meal period, and the doorbell starts ringing like crazy, and it was Mark DeMarco and Eddie Juergens, who just got on the apron coming in for meal. We were coming in for meal, and like the door's ringing, ring, 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 bang, bang, bang. The side door, one truck had a door on the side that actually opened up to go into the 13th precinct. It was kept locked. And so at the same time, you got the door going into the 13th precinct. So it's like, what the hell's going on? We run down. All I remember hearing Eddie Juergens say, get some hand tools. The building next door is on fire. And we got people bailing out of the building and on a fire escape. So Frankie gets back of the truck, grabs a Scott pack. I said, give me one. He tosses me a Scott pack. Frankie throws on his Scott pack. I throw on my Scott pack. Now, everybody's converging on this building. I mean, I don't know who put the radio transmit. The truck never had to leave quarters. I mean, that's how close this job was. But the cars that flew and 2 truck units and everybody's coming across the bridge because they're hearing us saying we got numerous people hanging out windows, fire escapes. We're walking literally to 13. It's the first or second building right next door to 13th precinct. That's how close this thing was. As we're walking up, I could see from the ground floor the heavy fire in this, what I thought was a basement apartment. What I didn't know, that apartment was a duplex. There was an interior staircase inside that front apartment. So Frankie goes in and he goes, boom, he goes up the stairs to start grabbing people out. We go to the back and we start wanting to get everybody out of that first floor because we realize there's fire. And again, I'm not a fireman. I know nothing about fires. Over the years, as time went by, they did put us through some type of fire training. I know a little bit more about fire and fire protection devices now, only because when I retired, that's what I did. I became a fire and life safety guy in high-rise buildings, but I'm not a firefighter. But Richie Danduran, who was in quarters having dinner with us, because he was scheduled to work a late tour, and he just finished working his second job over at Two Penn Plaza. And he came out with us too. And Richie was a volunteer fireman. And Richie's in civilian clothes. And he also had a scat pack on it. No, he didn't. Richie goes into the building with us. And all of a sudden, thick, big, black, billowy smoke starts pouring out into the hall. It's blowing out of this door. Again, I'm sure if there's a fireman in the room listening to this conversation, there's probably some type of flare. I think it was a flashover.
Yeah, that's what it was. That's what they said it was.
Richie recognized that this was getting bad. It was getting bad very quickly. There was probably about 3 of us in this hallway at this point with civilians. He gets behind us. He throws his hands out like this, and he goes, "Everybody out now!" And he starts really pushing us forward out the apartment building. We get out we literally get off the step, and this thing blows. Boom, door goes open, and this thing lights up for a millisecond. Lights up, and then there was fire contained to the apartment. Frankie was between the 2nd and 3rd floor and he got caught up in this blast of hot air, and he sustained bad injuries, and eventually it was discovered that his esophagus was burned really bad. But what happened was Frankie had the air pack on, but all the nylon straps that attach to your head and that you have to pull strap, and right down to the nylon straps that you use, they weren't Nomex at the time, they were nylon, so they melted away. So now what happened was, as he got hit with that heat, it pulled the mask off of him. So he took a direct blast of that hot air into his lungs. I'd like to talk a little bit about Frankie, because I had a lot of guys that we lost on 9/11, but sometimes we seem to forget that, the guys we lost before 9/11.
Right.
And what was sad about Frankie is Frankie was up there and nobody was with him when he went down. So we didn't know he was up there, which when you got guys running onto fire escapes, shit goes sideways. But next thing I know, we're on the block, and all these people that are getting passed out the window, the fire department shows up, they go in there, they're working on the fire, but people are coming off the fire escape. So now we transition over from, we got the Robert Shaws out, oxygen out. We're taking care of people who are burned. We're giving oxygen to people who have smoke inhalation. And fireman grabs me. He goes, "We got one of your guys up the block. He's hurt bad." And I'm like, "Where?" And he goes, "Come on." And I go up the block, almost up to 3rd Avenue. And here's this, what was left of a uniformed police officer on the sidewalk. And now at this point, Mark DeMarco's with me. And I'm like, guys going, fireman's going, "He's one of your guys." I'm like, "Mark, who is he?" I didn't recognize him. He goes, "Fireman's at him." He goes, "He's one of your guys. Look." And he points to Frankie's belt, not the gun belt, but his uniform belt. And Frankie had one of those police emergency squad belt buckles on. So I'm like, holy shit, who is this? It gives you extent of his injuries. Shortly thereafter that, we were able to grab Gary Mahowski, who had a Robert Shaw that was given to a civilian. Marco yells him, "Hey, Gary, get that thing over here. This cop needs it more than the civilian needs it." Gary comes over, and we start giving him man. He came back, and he was in a lot of pain. And Mike Stapleton and John Harvey, who were on scene, both of them are RNs. We start covering them with sheets, putting sterile water on, get him into an ambulance, get him up to the burn center. And we're in the ER with him in the burn center. And literally the doctors have to, John and Mike and the rest of the guys that were up there, we had to hold him down while they were trying to medicate him. He was in so much pain. And I'll never forget that the only part of his body that wasn't burnt was his boots when we took his boots off, and I was holding his feet. And that was the only part I could hold him and touch him and rub his feet and help to hold him down. But that poor man, let me tell you something, he went through hell. And, I think for me at least, we talk, I was having a conversation with a friend not too long ago, and somebody says, you take things very serious. I don't take myself serious, but I take what we do and I take our training very serious, because you know what? I know it saves lives. And again, we're better today because of these little things that happen, and usually it was at the hands of another cop or fireman, dying. We got better at what we're doing, and for me, and my generation came in. We the old timers kind of looked at us as we were buffs. And my father one time told me, he goes, you got to be a buff to be here, because if you don't want to do this stuff, you don't want to be here. Don't pay it. Don't worry, you're buff. A buff is a good thing. He goes, but what we started doing is we started pushing to get more training. And then that rope confined space ROCO training that I told you about that went to an outside vendor, we started teaching it at Floyd Benefield. Guys like Timmy Smith, Dennis O'Connell were instrumental in getting us to be able to do it at in-house. So every ESU cop coming through the training got that. And then every ESU cop that the guys that took over the EPT program, oh my God, I'm going to forget his name. He's going to kill me. Favara and all these other guys that got involved in that, Steven Steckenoffice, that made that program what it is today. It just got better because guys cared. Then you had guys like who was probably the primo training guy of all time, that the guy will train 24/7. Who am I talking about, Mike? You know who I'm talking about. Mike Langone. Mike Langone was these guys. That was the caliber. The guy. I'm sorry, Tommy Langone. Yes.
Well, yeah, Tom Langone was like the epitome of an E-man, pretty much. Him, and the guys of 10 Truck. Him, I think Buckowitz was in 10 Truck. Glenn Klein, our buddy Glenn Klein. Those guys lived and breathed the job. Still do.
And that was the generation. That was my generation coming up. So the training evolved and the training got better, and we passed that on. Just like I'm sure today, I don't know what they have on the REP. I could tell you now, the equipment and the training is probably far superior than anything we went through. But you do what you do. I used to tell them, I'm on the downside. I started getting involved as a boss in the school. My first class was the class that went in the spring of 2001. And that was the class that Brian McDonald was in. And I'll never forget.
He was that new in ESU.
He was that new.
Wow,
Brian McDonald went in.
I knew he was new.
And I got to tell you, another one that tags at my heart with Brian McDonald is he was one of the first groups I got involved with training. And, people, I think the cops that went through the training respected me because I didn't sugarcoat things. I gave them the real deal. I told them what life was going to be like, getting in that REP with your partner. And I told them, I says, you're going to go out there and within a year, somebody's going to be involved in a shooting. Somebody's going to end up getting hurt and getting 3/4. Somebody's going to do something stupid that's going to get them kicked out of the unit. But this unit can get, if you don't pay attention to what we're doing at this field, you're going to get hurt. You're going to lose the job, or you're going to get killed, or you're going to kill somebody. So, and that usually got everybody's clock reset when I would give those speeches. I got to tell you, I didn't really have to push that hard with the group that came in at post September 11th, because those guys came in with their game faces on. They were like, we're here. We don't care what you want us to do. Just tell us how to do it, and we're going to get it done. But Brian McDonald was in that class, and Brian was a very serious guy. And I could see sometimes I was, I'm saying things, and I could see by the looks he's getting me. He's giving me that really like concerned look, like, gee, maybe this isn't for me. So, when you train people over a period of time and you're in front of the room, you get to read people. And I get out of the room and I go, Brian, come here, let me talk to you for a second. I says, Brian, I'm trying to make a point when I say this. You're going to be fine. You're competent. You got all the skill sets. You're squared away. You had that background from the military. Don't let me what I'm saying in this room scare you to the point where I hope you're not having second thoughts. No, I'm not having second thoughts. He goes, but Sarge, he goes, you want to get me nervous. Is this going to really happen? And I'll never forget this. Is stuff like this going to really happen that fast? You see the irony here? That class got out, I think, June or July. And then
he died 2 months later. And you know what Kenny Winkler told me? Kenny Winkler was telling me when I had him on, that of all the losses, I mean, all 23 bother him, of course, but of all the guys from ESU that died that day, it's his loss. And Bob Basucci told me the same thing that bothers him the most, because of how new he was. He was really he put the J in junior, and that's not a knock on him. It's not that I'm not saying he wasn't a good Amy, and obviously he was in the short time he was one, but he was so new, and he didn't make it that.
You know what? You don't want to lose anybody, and I will. And I look. I was the eye in the sky that day because I was in the aviation unit above,
right?
And listen, I can say this. It's the sometimes you step to the left, Mike, and things work out for you, and sometimes you step to the right and things don't work out.
Right.
And I got to tell you, that's the reality of September 11th. There was guys down at the field when that job came in, and I think it was Hollyfield that made the first transmission. We got a plane into the towers. I was sitting with a lieutenant and at the field. There was no STS class in. We were getting ready to train 40 newly promoted lieutenants, and it wasn't training. We basically give them what we started to do to forge a better working relationship with patrol lieutenants. And working relationship is a bad word. We wanted them to know what the assets that the issue had and how we could help you on patrol. It was one of those type of things. Come down, look at the equipment, and just to give them a better understanding of how we operate. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm trying to set this classroom up for 40 lieutenants that are coming. And I look out in the parking lot and nobody's there. And I go to Bill Bernard, who was the special ops lieutenant there. I said, what's the matter with these guys? These guys get promoted. Nobody wants to come to work on time. There's nobody here. He goes, something's wrong. I said, yeah, what's wrong? I says, the job's changing. I said, now I guess they figured they're on the executive schedule. They're going to show up when they want to show up. And he goes to the training calendar. He goes, you're a knucklehead. I said, why? He goes, that training's not today. He goes, that training's tomorrow. And it was a beautiful day out. And I look him and I said, you know what, Lou, since it's tomorrow and it's not today, I got so much time on the books. I'm going to take lost time and enjoy the rest of the day. He goes, no problem. Then you heard, boom, everything changed after that. Then Hollyfield put over about the plane going down. And we're like, I said, did you hear that? And listen, I know you had people talk about 911 and the planes hitting, but I'll synopsis it up fairly quickly. That day went from that, and every radio transmission after that just was worse. You can't say it got a little bit better. Everything just progressively got worse. But back to my point about, if guys step to the left, they survived. If guys step to the right, they didn't make it. We have specialized equipment down at Floyd Bennett Field that gets called out for the big jobs. Now, you have at this point, you have a major airline that hit the building. And you also know you have a second building as what guys are running out. I had to stop guys. Guys, everybody can't go to the scene. Somebody's got to take the tractor trailer, go around the back. We have a refrigerated truck there. Well, there's only one reason why I'm bringing a refrigerated truck to a scene like that. We need to have it. You know what I'm saying? I don't want to be, but that's the only reason.
But that's the reality.
That's the reality. I'm like, listen, you can't go. You see, you can't go. You're the only. Not everybody's qualified to drive a tractor trailer. Go to the back. Go to the hangar, get the tractor started, go to the back, hook it up. That's got to get a highway escort if you even can. That's got to get into the city. Donald, get out to the aviation, start rigging up the 412s. We're gonna have to get helicopters up in the air. And again, did I know we were going to rappel? I don't know. We did it in '93. We were using it to drop guys on the roof. But
right.
Let's get. And I don't want to be in a helicopter. I want to be on the ground. I said, no. You're going to get in a helicopter because there's only me and you left, and we're the only two guys here right now that know how to rig this ship, and we got to bring the ships into the city to get the rappel teams. So, listen, Richie Bizzetti was the guy sent to go get the refrigerated truck and the trailer. First, he had to go get the keys, get the tractor out of the hangar, drive it around the back, and what happens? He opens the back of the refrigerated trailer after he hooks up the tractor. It's filled with pallets of rags. So you say, what is pallets of rags doing in the back of this tractor trailer? Well, in ESU, you have a lot of cleaning and equipment. So you're constantly going. We used to the shop would deliver rags to the truck. So you had to clean the equipment with. Well, I don't know. They must have went on like one of these wholesale warehouse sites or something. They bought like 13 pallets of rags. And now Richie's got this truck full of rags. He can't bring a truck full with rags if we're going to need to put something in that truck. So Richie was quick feeding. What does he do? Sanitation had their driver training unit down there. So he literally crosses the street, goes over to the driver training for sanitation, and they're all sitting in the room watching the news coverage like everybody else would. And he goes, I got a problem. He goes, I got to get this refrigerated truck into the city, to the site. He goes, it's loaded with pallets of eggs. I need help emptying out. Well, everybody emptied out that room, and like within 10 minutes, they had all those rigs out. They threw all the rigs on the runway at Floyd Bennett Field, I'll give you, but they got it out. And look, I don't know if that had anything to do with it, but years later, you know, I mean, I ran into Richie at a racket, and he's like, you know, I was a little pissed off at you that day. He goes, but you want to know why? The fact that I had to go and get that. Richie was literally coming out of the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel when the towers came down. Now, you know, it's 6.5 a dozen of the other. You don't know where people would have been. All I know is I was listening as best I can to these radio transmissions from my portable radio to my ear, and that's in the back of a helicopter that's got a motor going. And I heard the coordination going on with Kenny Winkler and the various teams where they were going throughout the building. And you know, listen, that's the nature of police and rescue work. Things are going to happen. Things, you know, you could train so much to do so many different things, but you can't ever plan or train for a 110-story building to fall down like that. And, you know, some guys, you hear this, you know the story. I'm not going to repeat the story with Mark DeMarco and Billy Bury, you know, how they were walking at the customs house, how they're walking along the wall. And I mean, they were milliseconds away from falling down this giant hole into a pit, never to be seen or heard from again.
And look what happened to the other three guys that were with Mike Curtin, Danny Richards from the bomb squad, John Valera, you know, that little split of where they were standing, you know.
You know, why did I go on a helicopter and why did I jump in a car and go there like everybody? Because you know what? You get trained that there's certain things that have to kick in.
Yeah.
You have a mass casualty incident, you're gonna need a refrigerated truck. You're gonna need that. You got a high-rise fire. Even if you're not going to do a high-rise rescue, you're going to need those helicopters at some point to transition to medevacs, to start medevacing people out to other hospitals, and then observe the conditions of what's going on at top. You know, it's 6.5, but some guys made it, some guys didn't. We lost, but we did lose. We lost the most talented group of guys, and I'm not saying that because I knew all of them. You know, weird things happen. You know, Mike, a week before that, I started to say earlier, and I keep going in all different directions.
I don't care. Go ahead. I'm at the field and it was a 4 to 12. We were running an M26 Taser refresher course. We were training the trainers. So we were training guys in the trucks to be instructors, to go back to the truck to recertify the guys in the truck. It was the new advanced air Taser. And I'm giving a class with one of the other STS instructors, and everybody, what squad was working the day of 9/11? You remember what squad that was? Was it the 3rd Herd? You had I know. Yeah, it was because Lanos was down there, Baraducci was down there, and I remember Franco telling me, you know, with Steve Driscoll, Steve wanted to take every possible piece of equipment up there with him.
Right. So what happened was everybody on our end came down for this training. Now, this wasn't an 8. This was post change. You're in the truck and you're going for the training. The truck goes in and you do 2 hours there. And then it was only a 2-hour block of training. Well, who do I see down there? Mike Curtin, Joe Vigiano, Rodney Gillis, and a couple other people that are no longer with us that were there. And I had the logbook there, and I was like, I wanted to save that logbook. I says, no one's ever going to believe that just 4 days earlier, these guys were here. These were your friends. These were guys that, you know, I was a cop with Rodney. We became bosses together. I was a cop with Mike Curtin. We were bosses. And you know what? These guys were all competent, talented, special guys. So, but there's no rhyme or reason why you need that. Well, we know why it happened, obviously. But
why those specific guys were the ones that didn't
I remember afterwards, the second day, down on Vesey Street, and you got we're working the section of Vesey Street. You got 7 World Trade Centers down, the footbridge is down, the other house building there is partially down on fire. 1 World Trade Center is down. It's a mess, dust all over the place. And I'm looking at this pile, and I'm looking at it going up 30, 40 feet, and I'm like saying, these were very tall buildings. I know, because I was a kid. I was a messenger. I went, And I'm looking at these things compacted down to where each floor is probably about 6 inches, 7 inches. I know there were a lot of voids at certain spots in the subway tunnels, but there were a lot of voids, but not enough voids to save 2,000 people, 2,500 people.
Right.
And I'm like, everybody, we all remained optimistic. And I remember hearing the guys saying things like, Ronnie was here and Santos was here. If anybody can make it, those two guys will make it. And I'm sitting there and I'm just looking at this mess. And I'm saying, man, there's got to be a lot of luck and magic involved to survive this, because it just basically evaporated people.
And that's the thing. Like Jimmy Carano was saying this, like him from the Bomb Squad, and about Danny, and he was saying that you couldn't understand it unless you saw it, because he wasn't there initially when they came down. Because when they were saying, "Hey, listen, the guys that were down there with Danny, we can't find Danny." He's like, "What do you mean you can't find him?" And you go down there, he's like, "Now you know why you can't find him." It's that pile. It's a miracle anybody, like those two Port Authority cops and the woman, were rescued alive initially.
We worked that pile. Look. I heard a lot of the guys you interviewed before, so I don't want to do a repeat of somebody else of a story. There were a lot of good talent guys, including myself, that got involved with that overnight job with the Port Authority, getting them out. But you want to know, that story didn't end there. That story ended almost a year later when we got down to the bottom of the pile and we started saying, okay, there's no more stuff to sift through. There's no more debris to go through.
Yeah, like but
you know what I couldn't understand for the life of me is, think about an office building. You got file cabinets, desks, workstations.
Right.
You have all this stuff there. I honestly seen parts of the computer components, the electronics, a lot of credit cards, pictures, ID cards, gas cards, pictures, mementos. I don't remember seeing one full desk. I can't remember seeing. So think about it. Think about a pantry in an office building has a refrigerator, cabinets. I don't remember seeing stuff like that there. Right. Think about the force of the energy of these floors collapsing on one another at 110 stories, how they were basically pulverized. It literally vaporized and evaporated everything. It's so, I mean, I know, when I sit down and get people, I do, with the job I'm doing now, I go out and I work with companies and I train and mentor their fire safety teams, and I do a lot of emergency preparedness training. I don't get in front of my clients, and I never talk about this stuff because I don't need to want them to know what I've done before. But they could tell, my audiences and my clients kind of realize when I do start talking about whether it's active shooters in a workplace or something, they start picking up, this guy's a little bit more into it than just, he's not just, trying to, check off the boxes. And I tell them, I take this very serious because I lived through the 93 bombing. I lived through 2001. I lived through the plane crash immediately after in October of 2001. Here, we're out in Floyd Bennett Field. We got a group of, I call them new ESU recruits, but I don't like using that term because they're not new cops. These cops are 5, 6, 7, 10 years on the job. They're senior cops. They're good cops. They're experienced cops. They just new to this ESU thing that we're doing. But I mean, we're making realistic training now. John Bushing's giving the vehicle extrication class. I'm doing a setup outside. I got 2 cars. I'm smashing them with the high-lows, the tractors into each other to recreate an accident scene. We got dummies buried, smashed under the dashboard. And we would give them the classroom lecture and say, okay, for this exercise, we would assign them the truck. We had a truck down there now. We had REPs down there. And what we did is we would assign the class who's going to be the chauffeur, who's the POIC, and who's in the car. I said, we're going to give you a job. And when we give you a job, here's how we run the job. The job starts, you acknowledge the job, you just go out there. Everybody else in the class, you're going to pretend like you drove an REP out there. You're going to walk there. You guys are going to figure out this job. If you get the job, we're not flagging you. We're setting up a realistic type scenario. You get the job done in 25 minutes, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, the job's done. If you're out there 3 hours scratching your ass trying to figure out how to get this job done, guess what? You're going to stay out there till you get the job done because we gave you guys the best training we could give. You had the best instructor in John Bushing and Franco Barbario giving you this training. If you can't figure how to do a dashboard displacement to remove that victim, we're not coming out there. We're not shutting the job down. So you're going to learn pretty quick. No one's coming to help you on this one. And well, we're setting up that type of scenario, and all of a sudden, Joe Ocasio, who got hurt on 9/11 with a bum leg, but he still showed up to work every day, never left.
I think he was telling me, because he's going to be on the show in October, he actually got shot at the
That's
job
what it was with the
2000.
Brooklyn job. That's right.
Yeah,
He got
shot.
Right. Well, he also worked on 9/11, and he shouldn't have been out there working, but that's the caliber of these guys.
Yeah.
But I'm in this high-low moving these vehicles in place, and I see him in the mirror running up, and he's hopping, limping because he's got a bum leg. He's got a busted leg. And all I kept hearing, the plane. And I'm like, what does this guy think? This is Fantasy Island. He's tattooed for Fantasy Island with the plane. He's pointing. I step off the high-low, and I look up, and we actually see this plane come down. Boom. Right into the Rockaways. I got to tell you, it rattled me. It rattled me because I've never seen anything like that before. And this is very quickly after 9/11.
Right.
And so one of the things we had the guys do, we had two police passenger vans assigned to us, plus a truck, plus 2 REPs. So I had everybody put all if we weren't using their rappel harness, whatever equipment we trained them in, they had tactics, they got issued their heavy vest, everything's got to go on the van or on the REPs. Because it says at a moment's notice, we may get mobilized for something. Remember, we're still not at a neck of woods. There was a very real concern of a terror attack after 9/11 involving a release of a chemical, biological, or radiological agent.
And you had anthrax.
We had the anthrax jobs we responded on, and there was a real concern about the fire burning at that site with I don't want to say the chemical they use in the air conditioning gas.
Right. That
chemical heats up, it turns into a very nasty gas. There was a real concern that if that thing cooks and that fire keeps burning, that thing starts pissing out some very dangerous chemicals. It could kill people that are working on that pile. So there was a mess of things going on. I go into the classroom, they're there, and I open up the door, say, everybody get your asses, get your butts on the cars. We got a plane down in the Rockaways. And they all look at me like, oh, he's playing games again with us. What is he going to do? What is he doing now? He's setting us up for something. And they didn't move quick enough. And I just lost it at that point. And I very colorfully suggested that everybody very quickly get in the vans and go out there. And then it was like, now it's being blasted over the radio, the SOD radio, which we had blasting in the hallways. Now, oh, he ain't kidding. He's for real. I said, no shit, Sherlock. I'm not kidding. I wouldn't come in the room. I wouldn't tell you if there's a plane. And Mike, God is my witness. I jumped in the REP. I forget who I went with. I'm not sure if it was John or maybe it was a Casio. Don't want me. All we kept saying is as we're on the runway pulling out of Floyd Bennett Field, we're down there in the Rockaways. You see the smoke cloud up in the air, and we kept saying, they got us again. They did this again. They took them. That's what I was thinking on the Freon with the phosgene gas. Thanks, John. I didn't want to say something I wasn't factual about, but that was a real concern.
Yeah.
But they got it. But again, it honestly, it turned out that it was just
a very tragic accident, and everybody on that plane perished. My God.
Let me tell you, we set up. We had the units at the scene. We set up the crime scene processing post in one of the abandoned hangars of Floyd Bennett Field. So look, we got the first class in the issue right after 9/11. These guys are down there. Now they went from, we're teaching them all this crazy stuff. Now we got them setting up a morgue so they could process all those bodies. And all those bodies, that plane crashed in the morning. By 1 o'clock in the morning, Floyd Bennett Field was empty. All those bodies were packaged up, tagged, investigated, photographed, and was sent up to the morgue. Now we got these guys stringing electric lines and generators to provide power in this abandoned hangar so the detective bureau can process this crime scene. It was crazy. But these guys got the best train. And so when these guys eventually got out and went assigned to trucks, I got
everything else after that had to be a piece of cake. If you deal with that off the start, then everything else is
think
great.
about this. I told you I went to STS. It was 5 weeks. They added a week for they added the 6 week for EPT. Yeah. These guys went through a revised version of STS. They didn't take EPT. They didn't take EMT, but everything else and they didn't take one other thing. But they pretty much got all the training, school by tactical rescue. I won't get into the particulars, but we were able to kind of, every time we were saying, well, could you give us another week? They kind of gave me another week. So we got really closer to that targeted 23 week. In reality, they left STS with, I would say, about 17 weeks of training instead of 23 weeks. But they were in a ballpark because they could come back for EMT. They could come back for the other stuff. But I got to tell you, son, these guys we got training at the field, plus who's going out to work the site. These are guys who knew an issue. Who's going out to work the site? And then every weekend we're working the site. Then you add to the fact that whoever completed hazmat training, we still had to beef up the hazmat portion of the issue. Then we had the UN. Then we had Yankee Stadium coming up. You know,
World Series. Yeah.
We had to cover all these details. It was a mess, but it was a mess. It was chaotic, but it was controlled chaos, if I could say that. We really controlled the chaos. And I got to tell you, these guys and gals that came in the unit at that time stepped up, and they stepped up big time. You know, listen, anybody could have turned and said, you know what? I came here because I wanted to wear a different uniform. I think it's a cool looking uniform, and you guys get to do stuff with helicopters. I wasn't expecting none of that. No, there was none of that. These guys went out there, and those guys that in those first 2 or 3 classes after 9/11, they are the leaders of the unit today. And today's unit is standing on the shoulder of those guys. And that's why, and again, we stood on the shoulder of guys from my father's generation. Then we had guys standing on our shoulder. It's those traditions and that dedication and wanting to do the job that makes it work. But I can bet you today, the ESU cops and the ESU bosses that are on patrol, many of them don't know me. I'm from a generation ago. Remember, I'm retired 19 years. Yeah. Many of these guys don't know me on a personal basis, but I can tell you right now, I can guarantee you, I know what their traditions are. I know that they're going to know the importance of never saying no to another cop, always helping another cop. I know the workload hasn't changed. You're still getting the gain entries, the lock-ins, the lockouts, on top of the hostage and the barricade jobs, the rescue jobs, the pin jobs, the jumper jobs. So I mean, the unit keeps going forward, and I look at pictures that get posted online sometimes, and I'm like, wow, that's an awesome piece of equipment. We could have really used that back in the day. But, you know, that's the beautiful part about a small unit, a highly motivated group of individuals, male and female, who love being cops, who love doing the job, and want to be there to help other cops out. And I got to tell you, you know, these are tough times. These are tough times to be a cop now. Policing is not easy. Policing is difficult. But I remember when I first came on, cops, when I got to the 6, 7, saying, why'd your father let you take this job? This job's dead. It sucks. There's no sense of being a cop. Well, I still wanted to be a cop. Just like today, there's still guys that want to be police. They want to be cops. And you know what? My generation had to adjust to the changes from the early 60s. We had to start doing things a certain way. And the generation that's there today, they're trained to use cameras. They have better training, better equipment. They have better less than lethal equipment. So you know what? If they want to be the police, tune out all the white noise, all the nonsense going on around you. It's still a noble job. It's still a great career. And I know right now probably the chat room is lighting up with people saying this guy's psychotic that he's saying that. You know what? This too shall pass. We have good times and we have bad times in policing. Every 25 years it gets bad. There's a corruption scandal or it gets bad. Well, guess what? This will pass. The NYPD will bounce back. I have the utmost faith in the training and the traditions that the NYPD's instilled will. So, you know, when I hear things say, the unit stinks, it's not the way it was when you were there. No, maybe it's not the way it was when I was there. It's better than when I was there. You know why? It's got to be better because you got smarter people, better trained people with better equipment. So when a guy tells me, it's not the same when you were there, no, it's probably better when I was there because we had better equipment than my father's generation, and this generation has much better equipment and much better training than my generation. So I don't want to hear, you know, I get off my soapbox there, maybe let you get a word in.
Nah, that was great. That was great. I'm fired up. Now I want to go take the test. But I think on that note, this has been, oh God, we're at 2.5 hours. It is time for the rapid fire. This has been, wow, this has been great. So it's 5 hit run questions from me, 5 hit run answers from you. You can say pass if you want. Are you ready? I imagine you are.
Yeah, why not?
First, don't worry, you did great. First, best day you ever had on the job.
Best day I ever had on a job. Does that equate with like a best job type of question, or is that a separate?
It could.
The best day, well, the best day I ever had on a job, I will tell you right now. Right before I retired, it was 2000. I retired in April of 2003. We had a class. It was in the winter time, snowing out. After 9/11, we had a truck 11, which was actually assigned to Floyd Benefield, and we had REPs there. And one of the things we did is the radio dispatcher, if the trucks would get backlogged on jobs and they had a heavy job going on, they'd call the ESU desk up and say, is there anybody in the school? Is truck 11 available to respond to a job? So they'd get me on a radio. Now, I don't know. There was a designation I had. Maybe it was ESU 14 or 16. I don't know. It's been a long time. But the radio would go, ESU a school on the air. And I'd get on the air. We got a child pinned in a snowblower on Ocean Parkway in the 6, and I think it was the 6-1. 6 truck was out on a confirmed barricade. 8 truck was out with 9 truck on a confirmed barricade. The closest unit to respond was 1 truck, but 1 truck was out on a hostage or barricade job up at 2. It was a trifecta. There was nobody available. And that's why we kept fully loaded trucks down there. So I turned around and says, yeah, we're going to respond. Now, as I'm responding to this job, I'm on the rappel tower inside the big tent down at Floyd Benefield. And I'm like, okay, don't stop the train. And you guys got the evolutions going. I get down, I rappel down, I grab Joe Burns, who was a graduate of a previous class, but he was helping us down because he got hurt. So he was somewhat limited duty. I'll say that because he jumped in the car to help me, and he really should have jumped in the car. So we go out in the REP, and we start heading towards Ocean Avenue. Confirmed girl, 8-year-old kid, pinned in a snowblower. And I got to tell you something, Michael, they're usually not a pretty sight when you get a job like that.
I imagine.
Kevin O'Rourke was the scuba sergeant. Kevin O'Rourke, he was another really good ESU boss. Unfortunately, when he retired, he went over to Afghanistan to do some work, and he got killed in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Kevin O'Rourke was going out to get lunch with, I believe it was Kenny Boss. I'm almost positive it was Kenny Boss. So they jump on the radio, they're going to respond. But they're responding from Flatbush Avenue and Avenue U, and they're responding with a pickup truck with scuba tanks and a Zodiac on it. Kevin gets there before we get there, and Kevin was really sharp. What he does is the girl's impaled inside the snowblower. So rather than try, they pull the stretcher out of the back of the ambulance, and let's get the snowblower and the girl to the hospital in the back of the ambulance. So they head off to Maimonides Hospital. With that, Kevin tells me over the radio, he goes, redirect to Maimonides Hospital. We got her going there in an ambulance. So, okay, so we go to Maimonides Hospital. Now, by this time, FDNY was there. We're pulling up with our REP. Now, machinery incidents, rescue jobs, I always liked rescue jobs because you don't always have to be a bull in a china shop with a rescue job. Sometimes an Allen key, a screwdriver, a pair of pliers. You can finesse. And if you have a little bit of mechanical ability about how the machinery works. So we're all in the ER, and here's this poor girl. She was soldiering on. I mean, she wasn't crying, but we got her on one stretcher as we're trying to hold her up, and she is wrapped around the auger of this snowblower. She's in a thick snow boot, and she's up to her hip in this auger, and it's like, I didn't see no blood. So like the plan was, as we're all putting our heads together, how to do this is like, well, let's cut this here. We could take the shroud off and let's get rid of the metal shroud around the auger, and we could better expose it, and we could see what we're doing. I'm like, wait a minute. There's an easier way of doing this. I says, these things have a safety that if something gets stuck in that auger, it's designed to snap. So instead of the auger keep spinning and damaging machine, it shears off and the auger will stop spinning. Well, I said, give me a little bit. Let me take a look here. And I take a pair of surgical scissors out, and I start very easily cutting around the girl's pants. And sure enough, I find a cotta pen, and Joe hands me a pair of needle nose pliers, and I pull the cotta pen out. And what it just basically did, it took the drivetrain for the snowblower and put it in neutral. So now I start seeing we could roll it back. And all we did is, I start slowly turning the auger back. And fortunately for this little girl, her leg, the way it got wrapped around, it got wrapped, corkscrewed around. She had 2, maybe 3 or 4-inch cuts in her leg, but no broken bones. And I have to tell you, that was probably one of my proudest days. More so because a couple weeks later, she emailed us a nice thank you note for saving her. And I guess it wasn't a dramatic ESU rescue job. I've been involved in other jobs that were more dramatic, but sometimes it's the simplest thing, like just taking a step back and comment. Let's look. It was a cotter pin removed with a pair of needle nose pliers, and you didn't have to start firing up all. We have the tools to do the job, yeah. But that was probably one of my proudest days. Seeing that girl walk away from that incident with just cuts and not seriously injured.
Second funniest call you ever responded to?
Well, I'm going to share one that wasn't actually mine, but it was a very good one, and I'm going to clean it up because it's a little weird. So 2 guys, Bobby Savory and John Harvey, they get a call down in the 1st precinct for a person locked in a porta sand down in Battery Park. Now, I tell you, somebody's locked in a porta sand. What do you think? Somebody went in there and some wise ass came and put a lock on and locked it, right?
Yeah, you would think horsing around,
That's what you would think. So, Bobby Savory, to hear him tell the story, I mean, I'm still starting to laugh thinking about it. They get down to the 1st precinct and says, "You're not going to believe this." The guy, they're looking at the porta sand, and Bobby and John like, "There's no lock on the door. Why are you calling us?" He goes, "You're not going to believe this. You got to go and you got to see this for yourself." He goes, "Open it up." Bobby opens up the door, John opens the door, and there's a guy inside the porta sand with his head sticking out of the commode. And he's like, Officer, you're not going to believe me if I tell you what happened. You're not going to believe me if I tell you what happened." And Bobby goes, "Pal, you're up to your elbows in fecal matter. I'll clean it up. You're up to anything you tell me at this point, I'm going to believe." And, they came back with pictures, so I know it was a true story. But weird.
Okay, third, that kind of segues into the next question. Third, weirdest call you ever responded to besides that one?
All right, so
if you can't say it, you can say pass.
No, I mean, the only thing that I did tell you, we did get a lot of weird calls with people having certain type of locks, master locks, combination locks, locked around certain body parts. And we got quite a few of them. And it was sometimes it was a handcuff that you had to remove from an area that was very private. And people would get creative what they would put there. So I will just say what made it very funny is you would go there and the story was always the same. "Officer, the guy robbed me and he put this on me." I'm like, I don't know. I've never seen a bad guy rob somebody. He's not going to take the time to take a master lock and put it around the Franken beans, if you know what I mean. He's just not going to do it. But if that's your story, I'll go with it. I'm good with it. Got a lot of that weird stuff.
Fourth favorite bar or restaurant in New York City?
I would have to say Delmonico's down in Lower Manhattan is a good place.
Very good place. I've heard of it. I need to go down.
Yeah, but the other place to get a good pastrami sandwich is Katz's Delicatessen on Delancey Street.
We'll have to hit it up when I'm in the city. I gotta message you. We'll do it. Fifth and finally, what advice would you give anybody coming on the job now? Not just ESU, but in general coming on the job now.
So I kind of said some of that before, but right. I think I don't want to repeat myself, but 2 things. Always be true to yourself. Always do the right thing. And when I say do the right thing, always remember, you raise your right hand for a reason. Everybody starts out as a good cop. Yeah, there's problems with the job. There's problems with every job. Don't forget why you're here. You're here to help people. You're here to make a difference, and you're here to take home a clean paycheck. You're not going to get rich being a cop. So you knew that before you took the test. So you knew you weren't going to get rich. So don't expect just because you're here now. Stop. Don't whine. Don't complain. We all cry. We all whine. We always feel the job's always out against us. Always go out there. Be a good cop. Jay Levy, who was a lieutenant I worked with, I'll never forget. On every job he showed up on, he would always end like this: "Do me a favor. Always be a good cop. You could screw up a job, and I'll always have your back, and we'll always make it right. But I'm not going to back you up, and I'm not going to always be a good cop." And that's what I say. Don't ever lose sight of why you came on a job in the first place, because we have a tendency we get burnt out with like 6 months on a job and now the job sucks. Just don't lose sight of that. And remember, always look out for one another. And like my dad told me, whatever you do in your career, in a police department, remember one thing: you want to be able to put your you want to put your head on the pillow at night and be able to go to sleep. So if you think you shouldn't be doing something or you're not sure, ask somebody and find out the right way so you don't have to lose any sleep.
I think this is probably, not probably, this is definitely in the top 5 of shows I've ever done. And we've done 199.
No, you're just saying that. You're just saying that, Mike, because you like me, because I watch the show all the time.
No, and I mean, I'm looking at it. It doesn't feel like we're at 2 hours and 45 minutes. It doesn't feel like it even is that.
And I'm
long.
glad you're pulling the brakes on us, because I got to tell you something. If you don't, there's going to be a major water leak in my office here in a couple of minutes.
No, but you did great. I mean,
Thank you, Mike.
This was awesome. This was awesome. You didn't break the record because Don Sadawi holds the record for longest show. He has that.
I wouldn't want to surpass Donald Sadawi.
No,
he hero of the 93. A hero of 93 found that VIN number.
He did. Yep. He told me about that when he was on the show. Great friend of mine, and he's a little under the weather. He's on the mend, though, so shout out to you, Donnie. Hope you're feeling better, buddy. Shout out to our friends tonight that tune in: Pete Segretti, John Latanzio, Patty Pogan Sr., Pete Pranzo, retired NYPD street crime lieutenant. Bob Savory is here. Steve Stefanakis, Ruth Ann Griffin, whose dad was Leo the Spider Griffin.
My father worked with him in 7.
Yep. Lemon Zest, if that is your real name. Trying to make sure I think I mentioned Joe Maliga. If I didn't, I mention you again. Kevin Malone, Kenny Vale, Jake Rixner, Eric Fries, retired first grade detective, Boxing MMA 365, Josher, Jay Driscoll, and Billy Ryan out of the Arson Explosion Squad, first grade detective, UDizzy 1969 as well. So coming up next on the Mike the New Haven podcast for episode 199, part 2, is the man they call Ziggy for Tales from the Boom Room, profiles of the NYPD's Arson, Explosion, and Bomb Squad, volume 27. Steve Berberich, who was in the Bomb Squad.
Good guy.
Very good guy. And a hero of 9/11, too.
Yep.
He was in the Bomb Squad from 1987 until 2002. So that'll be Tuesday. And then next Friday, we have episode 200. We're going to hit the milestone. I'll share who the guest is going to be as we get closer. In the meantime, on behalf of retired NYPD Emergency Service Sergeant Bill Kennedy, this has been another volume of the E-Men inside the NYPD's Emergency Service Unit. We will see you next time. Have a great weekend. For those of you that will be in Queens tomorrow, I'll be at the Mets game, the first game of the doubleheader. So if you want to come say hi to me, let me know. And as the E-Men like to say, anytime, baby. Have a great night. See you.
Good. Be safe, guys. Thank you.
No problem. Bill, stick around. We'll say our goodbyes off the air.